evening, everybody. Welcome to Case by Case. How's everybody doing tonight? Oh no, I think I got an echo. Hold on. I have an echo. Oh, sorry. Fixed it. There you go. Welcome in, everybody. If you haven't hit that like button and subscribe, please do so and share tonight's video. I'm hoping that Sergio is not tied up tonight. We set this up last week, so I'm hoping that he's remembered. I messaged him today. I know he's been really heavy into the Karen Reed case. So if he's unable to pull himself away, we will continue on and we will just reschedule. But hopefully he's going to pop in here any minute. How's everybody doing? Hi, Indy, Cindy, Judy, Deb, Michelle, my gracious Michelle. Kaleida Hope, unindicted co-conspirator, Rachel D, Skinny, Pertinent, Rotstar, Candy. Yeah, so, hey, Streets. Oh, we got to catch up, Streets. Yeah, goodness. So how's everybody doing? I know me and Quester were live the other day, and I know there was a lot of people in the chat, but there was a lot of people who've been reviewing it since we went live. And this week for me has, well, now I'm kind of like deflating from adrenaline of baby shower mode, different things going on. Life is life, you know. Hey, all eyes. So let's talk really quick here about Sergio's analysis of Kelsey. Hopefully he hops in here. But part two of Sergio's analysis, I felt personally, I can't speak for everybody. I won't speak for anybody else, but I'm going to speak for myself. I think Sergio's analysis of Kelsey was very spot on with the information that he had and with the interviews that he reviewed to get her baseline. That to me was pretty much spot on. And I just wonder if, well, I think I did ask him this after his part one analysis of if he had additional information about the case, would it change his mind? And he said no, that it would, it is what it is. Basically, the verbiage is the verbiage. And, the way that someone speaks, whether I guess the question is that I really want to find out is if the information that Kelsey was withholding from law enforcement on the day that her sister went missing, is she still withholding it to this day? I was hoping tonight with him I could go over. I have a whole list of questions actually to go over about things that I wanted to inquire and get his opinion on based on his analysis of certain topics, especially about the clothing and how adamant she was that she knew what the girls were wearing. And then, according to him, she didn't. And then I wanted to talk to him about the information about the hesitance about the woods, that she stumbles around the wooded area with her words. And I wanted to inquire about that. So, hey, free Ricky Bay. Weird cat, no falling asleep, bud, tonight. So Sergio's not popped on yet. So he's a busy man, and we set this up a week ago. He said he put it on his calendar, so hopefully he didn't forget and he got my notifications today. But if he doesn't, then we'll make do and we'll just discuss Delphi. And you know what? I'll give Sergio until about 7:15, and if he hasn't popped in yet, I know he's still tied up. And all eyes, would you want to pop on with me? And we can do some talking and some discussions. And while I have all of you guys here, I just want to give a huge shout out to Criminality, Teresa T's channel, for the hard work and effort that they put into creating the fundraiser for acquiring the transcripts for the trial, from the trial. And I think it's an honorable thing that she's doing. And I think it's a very classy thing to do in a situation like this. Only pay for them once. So Newton County or not Newton County, sorry, but Carroll County doesn't continue to make money off of everybody. She's going to share them. I think that's the best route to go. I'm really frustrated with the way the exhibits have been released. I understand wholeheartedly that the things that are sealed won't be, but everything else should be. And they're not being released. And that's going to probably end up being a major issue. And I do not believe, after working on Ashley's case, that PAC, who you go to basically argue your case as far as public information and FOIAs go to be released, I did not get a very favorable response from PAC simply about a recording that was taken during the course of the investigation in Ashley Garth's case. They didn't want to release it. And when we addressed PAC, we sent 7 case files that basically upheld our argument as far as what, this is precedent. These are arguments that have already been made, and this is why these things should be released. And the original denial that we got when PAC went back to Newton County, they then changed the reason for their denial. And basically PAC says they can do that. They can do whatever they want to do. So I think this is, Jody probably did herself a really bad disservice by doing things the way that she has. I mean, she's a clerk of the court. I understand that she works under the judge, but as far as a court reporter, these records are public documents, and they should not be withheld from the public. And again, in this case, it's, the most random things happen. Okay, let me hop in here, the chat. Let's see what's going on. I just woke up. I'm going to do a weird catwalk. Are you good? So, all eyes, do you want to, what'd she say? You can? Okay. So I'm going to give me about 5 more minutes. I'm going to wait and see if Sergio is able to pop on. I know he has been completely bombarded with this Karen Reed case, and now that the verdict is out, little old me probably isn't that significant on his schedule. So, anywho, I know what I can talk about. So, hold on, let me do this real quick here. I want to address a couple of things that were sent to me. And you guys know me. I don't like the controversy. I don't like the YouTube drama. I coached competitive cheer and gymnastics for 16 years. I've had enough. But sometimes there are things that I feel compelled to address, and I'm going to address it. And that being, um, so a couple weeks ago during one of our vault episodes, I made a public plea, request, suggestion to Kathy Allen that never once, let me just be clear, never once did I say, get this information and give it to me. What I did was I said, there are things that you can be doing to help your husband right now. On the happenstance that the defense team did not ask you for these items, your movements on that day, your movements, Kathy Allen, your phone records, Kathy Allen, were there phone calls, were there text messages, bank records, did Rick stop anywhere, did he get gas, did he buy a pop, did he buy beer? I brought up all of these things that I suggested that she could be looking for in documents or whatever if she hadn't already done it. So now that's been turned into this whole tirade of, one, I'm overstepping my boundaries. And the craziest shit about it is that a certain YouTube creator is claiming that Rick and Kathy Allen didn't testify because they wanted to protect their privacy, and the prosecution didn't have all of Rick's movements and they didn't want them to have his information because they're withholding it until the time is right. I'm sorry. I would have thought that during a double murder trial where you are up against the wall for a life sentence times two, that would be a very great time to say, I have evidence, highly exculpatory evidence, to prove where I was and where I wasn't on the day that you're claiming I was doing this crime. And what's being pushed now is that this has all been withheld intentionally from the prosecution. Does any of that make sense? I'm not making it up. Go listen to it for yourself. Supposedly the information was withheld from the prosecution because Rick Allen, the police could not continue to interrogate Rick Allen after his arrest because he had counsel. Yet he only had counsel for 3 days. And nobody told him he had counsel initially. And even though he had counsel, they still had a safekeeping hearing without his counsel being present, shipped him off, cuffed him up, put him in a dog cage, and shipped him out to Westville into a maximum security prison. And he went how long before he got the letter? And that whole thing was a sham. When it was written, when it was sent, what the timestamp was, when the court claimed they got it. He went how long without a fucking lawyer? So it makes no sense. Makes no sense. If you have, and listen, Kathy Allen can do, it's her husband. I get it. It's her husband. This is a public case. 2 little girls were brutally murdered. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to help if I can in any way possible. I'm not going to spend my evenings, my daytime, coming on here and badgering and name calling and doing all that jazz. All I'm saying is that you can't make public statements like that and not look ridiculous. We have information that we withheld intentionally because we didn't want to show the prosecution our hand. If you have exculpatory evidence that could exonerate Rick Allen, not just exonerate, but prove he's factually innocent, this is not a game. Why are we withholding it? I just don't understand. I do not understand where those statements are coming from, why anyone would make those statements. And you playing those games publicly and making statements like that, you are kind of really alluding to the fact that if there's information out there of Rick's location and whereabouts that day and they're not wanting to provide it, that's a problem. I understand that court of a public opinion. The court was biased. The truth was not allowed in. You can't get exculpatory evidence presented when Judge Gall won't allow third-party suspects to be mentioned. Kathy and RA had zero good options. No, I agree 1,000,000%. My suggestion was, because we heard absolutely zero about Rick and Kathy's movements on February 13th. We heard zero information at trial. My suggestion was to Kathy Allen, or, her three stooges that surround her, who seem to be pulling the puppet strings, to say, hey, if the defense team didn't ask you to look for these things, maybe you should start going back through your bank statements, emails. Was an email sent? Was an email opened? Did you have a house phone? Was a phone call made when Rick got back from the trails that day? Did he pick up the house phone and make a phone call? Did he answer a phone call? When he sat down and he logged into his stock trading account, is there a record of that? Did he make any trades that day? Did he call you? Did he text you? Did he use his bank card? What about the family members at his mom's that he didn't want to go out to lunch with? Well, what time do they claim he left? When they went to the restaurant, what time did they pay the bill? Let's conform a real vital timeline that helps prove Rick innocent. We didn't hear any of that. And the pushback that I'm getting now is that, first of all, I'm not entitled to ask for it. I'm not asking for it. I'm suggesting his wife gather it to help whoever takes his post-conviction relief case. But if that information was available during the trial, that's not third-party suspect information. That is, here, Brad, here, Andy, here, Jennifer, my husband was here. Here's the evidence. He was not on the trail down the hill, across the creek, in the woods at 2:32. So that's what I'm saying. This has nothing to do with what the court would allow in. So anywho, I'm going to drop the link. All eyes, come on up. I do understand that you're innocent until proven guilty, but not in this case you weren't. I'm sorry, court of public opinion. Yeah, but you know what? That's not really how this justice system works. You said that you are not understanding that you are innocent until proven guilty. It is not Rick's job to prove innocence when every fact is turned against him. You know what? It wasn't Karen Reed's obligation to prove that she was innocent, but her defense team did. They could have, are you saying that, if you're charged with murder, that you should just sit there and say and do nothing because the odds are stacked against you? No. I'm saying if you have factual proof that you were at home at 2 o'clock, 2:15, 2:30, 4 o'clock, when you're supposed to be muddy and bloody, walking down 300 North, you provide that information, because I'm sorry, I'm not going to lay my back on the scales of justice in this country that, well, it's not supposed to work that way, so I'm not going to do it that way. And if I get sentenced to 130 years, oh, well. No, I'm going to fight. I will do what I have to do. Because when you just sit back and you let the courts have their way, why are we blaming Rick and Kathy for being persecuted? No one's blaming Rick and Kathy anything. I'm not blaming Rick and Kathy for anything. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that there's a lot of things that Kathy, during this downtime of the direct appeal being filed, that if she wasn't asked to acquire all of this information, she could be getting it. Things that she could be looking up if she still had access to Rick's account. No one's persecuting anybody. Yep. Burden of proof does lie with the state, not the defendant. And how does that work out? Mm-hmm. Rick was persecuted, absolutely. But he was persecuted. But you know what you don't do? You don't have somebody come out and speak on your behalf and say, well, we didn't share with the prosecution where Rick really was, because we wanted to protect our privacy. We wanted to hold on to that information for when it could really count. Well, I'm sorry, but I look at 130 years as now's the time that it counts. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Why did the defense not present exculpatory evidence if it existed? And now we're being told by the spokespeople from Kathy Allen's party that there is exculpatory evidence that existed. They just withheld it to protect their privacy. And because they didn't take the stand because Rick had counsel right after he was arrested, and the prosecution doesn't have all the information. So we're going to go through a whole last trial and a conviction of 130 years and then present it? What kind of sense does that make? Absolutely none. What's up, girl?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Was trying to keep up with chat in between when you dropped the link, and in between I hopped on. Let me see. Here we go. I'm on my little browser here. So I do think it's important I go back and forth with all of this. I think it's important that we don't do any burden shifting, but that doesn't mean we can't give the man something to defend himself with. I think that is also okay. And I think it's a hard balance to strike in certain situations, especially an adversarial one with defense was not dealing with reasonable actors. They were triaging from day one, and I fully understand all that. And, but there are some things where I think, you don't have to make it harder for yourself either. I think Karen Reed's team did a very good job of giving her some things to defend herself with, even though she didn't. I mean, a defendant doesn't have to put on a defense at all if they don't want to. And ideally, they wouldn't ever have to, because people would understand the burden of proof belongs with the state. But so many people don't. The more we hear from certain jurors, people a lot more people than I'm comfortable with don't seem to understand the burden that juries have. And they think, well, if someone is innocent, they would just prove it, even though sometimes they can't, sometimes they're advised not to. But I do wish they would have given him something to fight back with, you know? I believe there's probably quite a few things they could have done that with, but it was the culture of fear that Goal kind of facilitated and cultivated. Nobody wanted to speak up. Nobody wanted to say anything. We don't know if people were scared to. We don't, you know, it's hard to know because nobody was really allowed to just come out with anything. It's very frustrating.
No, it is. And I mean, this whole case was a lopsided case. I mean, Judge Gall
Yeah.
was absolutely 1,000,000% prosecution bias. And, but at the end of the day, you know, she putting on a defense is Richard Allen's right. Putting
Yeah.
on I mean, yes, he doesn't have to take the stand, and it's the state's burden to prove that he did it. But at the same time, he's permitted to put on a defense. And I don't know what transpired behind the scenes. I know that, just going through creating the vault and going back through the timeline and piecemealing and like fine comb throughing all of the information, it's kind of like there are some things that were so evident that
Mm-hmm.
the defense could have presented that they didn't, or they could have challenged, or they could have made an argument in front of the jury that they didn't. I think they relied on Rick. I think they were just overwhelmed with defeat, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, even if you look at I don't remember if it was a motion when they basically told Goal, we advised him not to even participate in the pre-sentencing investigation because his rights have not been upheld. He has not received a truly unbiased prosecution. Like we're not they basically said we're telling him not to even cooperate with it. Like file your thing, whatever. We're done. And I try not to read too much into that more than it says, but part of me I can I reserve space for both. Like I can see from their end after battling with Goal for so long, and every time they actually did put up a real fight, she retaliated like
Hmm.
significantly. And so I'm just not ever going to pretend like I know how I would weigh. I don't think anything they did was their first choice. I just don't. I'm very firm on the fact that they probably did the least bad option available to them because that was the best they had. Like there were I forget which thing specifically it was, even with the prosecutor. At one point they wanted to either admit something or bring something up, and Nick turned around and was like, well, you can put him on the stand. It might have been when they were trying to argue for the completeness, because the prosecutor wanted to admit one of the recordings out of three for one day, the phone call recordings. The prosecutor only wanted to admit the one that helped him. And when Rozzy was trying to argue to include the rest of them to give it context, because the rest of the confessions and conversations kind of render the other ones ridiculous. But you have to take them all into account. But of course, Nick wanted to curate everything and be very selective, and he did get his way. But they even used that as an opportunity. We're like, put him on the stand if you want to add more context. Like,
Well,
it was just it's like so unfair and so gaslighty, and I don't know how if there's a good way to proceed when those are the people you're dealing with, when one's a judge and the other's I feel like Joel I feel like Goal sat first chair for Nick with a lot of this, like she you
she
know
did. No, she did. And let me address again this. Come on now, court of public opinion. You did not hear that it was Kathy and Rick's fault for not taking the stand. No one said that. What I said was their spokesperson claimed they strategically, go listen to your homie, strategically did not take the stand because the prosecution didn't have certain information. First of all, I agree that Rick nor Kathy should have taken the stand under these circumstances. This judge, this prosecutor were hand in pocket. There was no winning in this courtroom. So I agree with the fact that they did not take the stand. I don't know the circumstances surrounding the search warrant. When the state comes in and they invade your home and they take every single one of your electronics and every single one of your uh, phones, all of this technological data that they took, I don't know how long they're allowed to hold on to it once it's returned, because during that time frame, that is out of Kathy Allen's possession. My suggestion was, if she's got these items back and she has access to certain things, and because the defense was not just drafting a 136-page Franks motion, they were also fighting being kicked off the case, going to the Supreme Court, then coming back and facing a contempt hearing. You've got crime scene photos being leaked. The defense had way more on their table than they could handle. My suggestion was, Kathy Allen, now that you have this downtime and the direct appeal is being filed, no new evidence can be presented in a direct appeal. It's all on the legal and legalities aspects of the pretrial motions, the trial, and the verdict. And in this case, the motions to correct error. We have all of that going on. Did the defense forget to actually go back to February 13th and say, hey, can we dig into all of this and find and track Rick's movements? I believe that Kathy has the ability to do that. And that's being blown out of the water with, they have all of this information that they just chose not to provide because they didn't want the prosecutor to know. So don't come over here and twist my words, and don't come over here and act like I'm saying something that I'm not saying. It is realistic to think that as a wife, at least me, I don't know about all eyes, but me, if it was my husband sitting in Rick's shoes, I would be digging. I would be doing everything
Oh,
that I could.
absolutely.
And
I
I was just
I would
telling
be there. I would be my husband's attorney's worst nightmare, probably.
her,
I wouldn't be able to, like, I would be so restless. I'd be such a mess. But like, I also, if I found anything like if there was any inkling, he'd be like, I'd have supper ready on the table by the time they came to pick him up. Like, he'd be hog-tied. Like, like everybody's different. But like, if I had any suspicions or even concerns, I'd proceed one way. But like, I'd be doing something. It'd probably be messy, but still, like, I don't understand. I don't have that kind of restraint that some people do. But I have learned, especially in recent weeks, there are some people who are very firm on one approach and others who are very firm on the completely opposite approach. And at a certain point, I mean, they're going to coexist with each other, whether they like it or not. But like, yeah, it's hard for me to understand, but I'm just trying to also realize I've never been in that kind of position. I have no idea all of the different things they're having to weigh. I would assume every defense attorney on the entire planet would advise everybody not to say anything ever, which I get. But,
mm-hmm.
for the same reason, we're kind of like, well, give us something to like, you know, fight back with, basically. Um, they're like, no, you don't understand the burden of proof. Like, like it's just a constant back and forth. And it's just not always easy to ask for two things at once because I don't want to burden shift. But I would like to see this man defend himself with something for his own sake. Like there's dignity in defending yourself. And
There's
that is the
nothing.
part for me that's hard, is not, I feel like he hasn't been able to speak for himself. Everybody, since he was arrested, has been, we only know what we know through everybody else. He has not been able to speak for himself, at least not to anybody other than the court. And that's got to
And
be frustrating.
and I truly believe that was the intention with the safekeeping order,
Yeah.
that it was to silence him and it was to sweep him off and disconnect him from his life, his wife, his family, his
Yeah.
normalcy. And you know, I just Kathy Allen, I can't even I can't imagine walking in her shoes, because and I give her a massive amount of credit for
Yeah.
having the the self control, to stay out of the spotlight, because I personally would not be able to do that. I would personally be on a flipping rampage, if I and that's just me.
Yeah.
That doesn't make her wrong. That's just me. And I there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no guilt or shame in
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
defending
At
yourself.
least in our circles, there is no actual judgment passed with any of this. We just feel helpless and we're trying to like think of ways like if this would help, let us know. Like if you can think of this, like we're just she probably feels equally as restless, I would imagine. Constantly just trying to think of stuff. And I feel like it's probably best for everybody to just extend good faith on everybody's behalf who's doing that because it does come from a place of just wanting to help. And I don't know, if she's got very strict orders from attorneys or like advice, counsel, all of that, if they are just saying it's never worth it, because there are, things can be turned against you in a heartbeat. I do fully get that. But even if somebody told me that, I probably would, I just don't have the restraint, I don't think, to follow that kind
Mhm.
of advice. I would
Right.
hope that I would follow the advice I'm given, but I couldn't. That's why I don't, and it probably is overwhelming. I've never, like, the whole world would recognize her name or be able to Google it and find out all kinds of stuff. That's got to be extremely unnerving.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. But
But I hope she at least knows that we're kind of like, no judgment if you don't, but like, if you're ever up for it,
we're here.
yeah, it is.
We're
And
here.
that's the way I took it. When I went back and watched it, because I missed the beginning when, um, or the section where it first started coming up, like, hey, let us know. Like, I, I took it in complete, like, coming from a completely good place where it's just, we've done all we can with what we have. And if there's more, we'll keep working. If not, we'll keep rooting for them. That's really kind of where we're at. And at the same time, aside from that aspect going on, there are also still very real questions that we'd like to get about what happened to the girls that we don't feel have been answered yet. And so I think sometimes some people kind of conflate the two, whereas we don't always, like, if we have to stop every conversation to make the distinction, it's hard to, like, sometimes
It's
I
kind
forget
of
to make that distinction like vocally, verbally every time because I just assume everybody already knows that about us. And so
it,
maybe, I don't know.
it's one big basket. And
Yeah.
when we were on a couple weeks ago on the doing an episode, and I threw those things out there. My personality, my hey, Kathy, there are things that you can do, because we didn't hear these things at trial. I'm picturing her sitting in her home, getting on her laptop going, oh shit, I never thought to look at this, or I never thought to look at that. And let me make some phone calls and see if they have any text messages or
Yeah.
can they call? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like give her
Well,
some motivation or some things to do that no one else in the world has to know that she's working on, that she can compile and put in a
yeah.
folder. And whoever she decides picks up his case, she's got it all there ready, handy. That
Well,
was
you've
my
also been kind of through this process with Ashley and with other cases that you've followed. So I felt like it was good because you never, even still, like to this day, I'm trying to get better about repeating things I've said. I feel like I've said 1,000 times that I don't like to repeat because I don't like it. I always feel bad repeating it. I'm like, oh, these people have already heard it. But there's always someone who comes away and says, I've not heard that before yet. And so it's just kind of one of those things where I'm not going to be upset if I've said it for the 1,000th time and somebody either hears it and doesn't agree or finally hears it for the first time. Like, it's really just if this is useful to anybody, I'm saying it for that reason and that alone. I'm not assuming that you would need my help or that you should take, it's that's kind of how I took it when you were doing all of that, was just from your experience
Mm-hmm.
in your cases, just kind of offering that insight from yours. I know they're different
Right.
situations, but there's a lot of insight that you would have that I wouldn't even be able to guess or recommend. I thought it was thoughtful. That was how I took it.
Sleuthy Goothy said, "Wait, where do we get?" She decides who picks up the case. Well, at this point in time, um, so we know that she had the offer from Kara and Michael, which she turned down. And between now and the end of the direct appeal, if somebody else comes along that makes an offer, she'll have a choice there. If she does not choose to go with anybody who actually offers to pick up the case, then she will not have a choice. And Rick will go on the waiting list with the public defender's office. It's a first come, first served basis there. And he will sit once the direct appeal is exhausted. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the direct appeal. I mean, we haven't even had the first filing. We know that it's probably going to be at least another year or so before, the courts start kicking it to and fro. And at the end of the day, with this direct appeal, everything's going to be kicked back right to Gall, unless we can create a campaign. And I'm sad, I hate to say it, but if we create a campaign to get her voted off the bench, because all of this is going to end up coming down during the time that she's up for reelection. And courts don't like to rule and make decisions
Yeah.
when the judge involved in the case is up for an election. So unless she's got somebody, and that is the gut punch in all of this. It is, because we don't have a say. Kathy and Rick are the ultimate deciding factors of their future and their fate. And I don't believe that Rick and Kathy are true crime fanatics or court case followers and things like that to understand how this process works. And when you have two of the best public defending attorneys in the state of Indiana offering free services and you turn it down, you know, who cares if your friends don't get along with Michael? Who cares if your friends don't agree with Kara? Who cares? For my biggest concern right now is that the discovery in this case is in the possession of the state. And we have seen
What they do to discovery in their possession.
what they do and how it's overlooked. I mean, cases with this amount of disparity of just the investigation on its own, what was done and what wasn't done and what was lost and what was mishandled, cases get thrown out for that. And nobody blinked an eye in this case. No one blinked an eye about the fact that we have 70 days.
Yeah.
Like, I am banging my head against the wall. Quester's banging his head against the wall just to damn near like pin down a timeline of an hour on February 13th, because we have no accurate information.
Yeah.
All of those people were supposedly interviewed. They contacted law enforcement. Law enforcement failed to respond until weeks later. And still, even weeks later, all of these things are missing. And we're just supposed to like agree that, oh, it's all irrelevant because, 8 years later, this stupid tip supposedly showed up in a drawer next to their greatest secretary who just happened.
Yeah.
So, Legal Lacey, we don't know who's, you know,
We don't know we know about who his attorneys of record are because they're on record. And apparently there's someone else it's reportedly, or it's been reported that someone has been handling things and advising her. I have no idea. Like she has someone, it starts with a C. I always mispronounce his name, but the one who released the statement after Murder Sheet was acting crazy, and he had to come out and make a statement on her behalf. I haven't heard another public statement from him. I know he's there, but aside from him, my understanding is that there's someone else working with her, at least with the civil stuff. But I don't know if they took the case or if they just looked at the contract and gave her their thoughts. Like, we don't have any, I don't think there's any verified information about any of that. I don't know if they're actually retained or if they're like, call us when this is over. I have no idea. I tried to ask and I was not able to get anywhere with that because I thought, well, we can just, with all the back and forth that was going on, I thought, okay, the people who seem to know, like, I'll just ask them and clear it right up. And I couldn't even get an attorney's name. Like, nobody can even say that because I thought, well, attorney, like, there's a public docket for stuff like this. This is not like state secrets, even civil cases, even in federal court. Latrell's case, like, you can pull up his information because it's not private. Like, he's being sued in a federal court. The orders, the criminal complaint, all of that is available, even though it's a civil suit in federal court. But I couldn't, and I thought, we'll just go through a third party and just take out all the personalities. We'll just find out what's what. But I have not seen anything anywhere. And so I just don't know what to make of it. But I did try to ask, and people were I think they were conflating what I was asking about specifically with whatever was going on with the contract. And I don't think they realized that there's two separate things. And the more I tried to make the distinction, the more angry people got, and I did not understand that at all. So I just dropped it. I'm like, well, okay, I guess we'll just see. I'll just kind of wait for an update. I don't really know what else to do in that situation.
Hey, Cryptex. Real quick, Cryptex, while you're on here, I was trying to get access to the Skip Jensen presentation that you had posted on your community page. I don't know if the link is expired, but my email is running across the bottom of the page. If you could email it to me, that would be great. I'd appreciate it. Hello, Michael.
Hi there.
Hi.
So, was all I saying, talking about not being able to find civil suit? Is that what you were saying you couldn't find?
Well, I couldn't find anything. My point was, like, I was trying to find it through, like, okay, what court is it in? So, like, we can take it out of the social media sphere and just look at the record and let the record speak for itself so that people would stop arguing, because I was still healing. And so, like, I was coming back in and didn't understand what everybody was arguing over. And I couldn't find anything anywhere of record other than his appellate attorneys. And I couldn't make any progress beyond the fact that people were saying he did have civil attorneys who were handling, because I was trying to figure out if somebody had told the statute from whatever Rozzy preserved or not. Like, that's where I came in when that was before April 18th passed. And so I was just trying to find out. And I have not gotten any progress since then. And I assume it came and went because I don't have any other information one way or another. That was really all I was saying, was that I don't know.
You're assuming what came and went?
Well, the statutory deadline for when you file a tort claim, we were trying to figure out, is that, like, if there's no claim made, because my understanding was that it wouldn't be until the trial was over that anybody could assess damages. And so we were trying to figure out, is that when the deadline starts for the 2-year expiration, I guess you call it? And then there were people saying, well, if they toll the statute, it's not a big deal. You just have to file something to toll the statute. And then, but nobody really knew what was going on because all we had was Rozzy's, the notice to preserve his right to file later. But we couldn't get a straight answer, because we're not attorneys. So we were just asking, what does this mean? Is this passing or not? And I think people were confusing it with a future, huge, like a 1983 claim or whatever, separate from the issue that Rozzy preserved. But I don't know.
The issue, so the tort claim is irrelevant in federal court. The fact that nothing happened with the tort claim notice, I actually don't know that much about. I don't know whether the 2 years runs from the time you file the tort claim notice or the 6 months the AG has to respond at the end of that. I can tell you the statute of limitations on the 1983 action is running day by day. I've said this a few times. People out there some people were saying, "Oh, he's got civil lawyers and blah blah," and like, well, when they show up, I'll believe it. I don't believe it. You haven't found anything. There isn't anything.
So they would have had to have filed, correct?
Well, somebody tried to tell me, it could be sealed. It's secret. I'm like, well, the record, it's not like it's invisible. No. There's still a record of it, and the contents of it are sealed, and that's fine. But there would still be a record of it if something had been filed, even just to toll the statute. But I couldn't find that either.
Well, I wanted to file a complaint just to. Filing a complaint does not toll the running of the statute of limitations. What you can do, if you get enough factual material in, is you can set it up so that you can add claims later which will relate back to the date of the original filing. The idea being that if the facts are in there, the folks are on notice of what they can be sued for. It's Federal Rules Civil Procedure 15C. And what I wanted to do in my less than expert way was just get a civil complaint filed for Rick.
Yeah, just keep something moving along.
And, when I wanted to do that, I was met by this well-meaning but dangerous North Carolina paralegal who volunteers for a project there, I believe. Apparently putting together some sort of pro se complaint for Rick. And it's like, okay, that's what you all want. That's what you all get. I haven't even seen that.
Isn't the pro se form 1 page long so that inmates can, if it's pro se, it's like you fill in the blanks. I looked up the form. If you're going to file pro se in the procedure, it's like 1 to 2 page PDF. And most of it is just the instructions.
And you have
it's 1 pages of. You always add, you have to add extra pages because you've got to make factual allegations. I mean, look, Rick's complaint, the way I imagined it, now I haven't actually, I never started drafting it, right? One of the first rules of lawyering is don't do work you don't have to. And my guess is that civil complaint for Rick would be 20 to 30 pages at least of factual allegations before you ever get to the claim.
Well, my other question about this, and the reason I was so trying to figure out what was going on, was mostly because when it comes to the civil stuff, my understanding was that the whole reason that they skipped him past the reception diagnostic center and sent him straight to solitary straight to 24-hour surveillance, at least according to the warden, even though he's a liar, he at least did say this on the record at a hearing. It was to preserve evidence for future litigation. And then we have Walla coming back and saying she didn't preserve it. She actually destroyed it.
Yeah, she destroyed all of it.
And so that was kind of where I was like, where does that leave? Like, what options are left from that? And I'm like, does that, because I mean, that's pretty final.
That would all have to be sorted out in the civil suit. And I'm not sure that Gallipo is telling the truth about
Anything.
Rick not going to RDC. I think he did go to RDC for a few days.
Well, he didn't, because he's on camera at DOC. Like, defense cited a DOC video from Westville on November 3rd of him in his cell. So he was definitely there on the 3rd.
Think about what he said in regards to there being no audio on any of Rick's.
He said it 6 times during that. He answered it 6 different ways. No audio. And then turns out there was audio. He also said, though, that Richard Allen, he signed an affidavit on April 6th when the state rushed to Westville for that meeting to talk about the allegations and Rosie's filing. They rushed over there, and Nick had the warden sign an affidavit that he broke his tablet. So he would have had to have broken it before April 6th. And he testified that they did not replace it until the first week of June. He said it was about 2 weeks ago. And at the time he said 2 weeks ago, it was smack dab in the middle of June. So it would have been, so what were all these, like, that was supposedly the only way he could make calls and stuff. Like, he's just all over the place.
Well, and that's the reason a civil suit is important beyond a civil suit. And that is, all that would be pieced out in discovery in the federal civil case. And, as with the post-conviction investigation, I wasn't offering to litigate a 1983 act. I was offering to get something filed while I look for somebody else who can actually professionally handle it. I can't deal with the discovery. I have no capacity to deal with the discovery that would be involved in a civil case with Rick Allen. And I have been looking for civil rights law firms for 6 months and change now. And
I just want to put it out there in the atmosphere that anybody that has any legal experience, hint, paralegal, that's giving legal advice to a defendant to file anything pro se does not have that defendant's best interest at heart. When you file pro se without any legal advice and no one overseeing your filings, you run a high risk of filing things that will then down the road hurt you and create issues where things and arguments that you've raised will be procedurally barred from ever being raised again. Regardless, the court will not show sympathy to someone who's filing pro se, aka I'm representing myself here. When you make that decision and you step up to the podium and you're representing yourself, the fact that you don't know the law, most courts do not hold that in. They don't lower the standard.
They don't care. They do not care even a little bit.
Well, I'm here to tell you that while the Indiana court scandalously, in my opinion, repeatedly say we hold pro se litigants to the same standards as lawyers, the good news is that federal courts actually construe pro se pleading liberally, they say.
They what?
There's a way to read it. What?
So I didn't understand what you just said. What'd you say? In federal court?
I said the federal courts construe the pleadings of pro se prisoners liberally. which means, and if a case is complicated enough, a Fed court can appoint counsel. The problem is, and you mentioned this, Amy, you mentioned having a pro se pleading filed without having it reviewed by a lawyer is bad business. It's actually worse business to have it reviewed by a lawyer because although there are no opinions in Indiana, there are opinions in Illinois District Court, never gotten to the Seventh Circuit yet, that it is an ethical violation for someone to file a pro se complaint that has been reviewed by a lawyer.
So that's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Well, yeah, but the reason the reason that it's an ethical violation is for the lawyers involved. The reason it's an ethical violation is federal courts do construe pro se complaints liberally. And if there's a lawyer standing in the doorway, the pro se litigant shouldn't be entitled to that benefit.
Right.
Which is to say, the Illinois District Court opinions on the subject make perfect sense to me. And in any case, I certainly let, and people will make fun of me for this some more, I let the people who matter know, if he's going to file a pro se complaint, do not send it to a lawyer because the lawyer may not know they could get in trouble.
So, going pro se, in my opinion, is just not a very good idea at all, especially in a case like this, because you as someone filing pro se, you are limited to resources in prison, and you don't have the ability to fully access the documents. You're limited. It's just, I would never recommend. I've seen too many cases where somebody has filed pro se and they didn't know what they were doing and it cost them. So in a case this big, I feel like a civil lawsuit where
I could have filed, and maybe I'll make it. Maybe I should send it to you, Amy, and you can make it publicly available. I can. I filed I amended a complaint for a bunch of prisoners in the 1983 action. So that's when I say amended a complaint, it means I rewrote it. And you can see what one of these things looks like, and that I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I would have gotten every claim in for Rick, but I do have the Westcott report, and with the help of other people like All Eyes who are all over it, I would have gotten tons and tons and tons of facts in, and the complaint could have then been amended later before the statute of limitations ran. And it's running every day now. It's just every day. It's another day.
Do you have an actual deadline for that statute running out?
It runs, so it's a 2-year statute of limitations. So you go back 2 years so anything that happened, unless the statute of limitations is told, and you shouldn't have to make a tolling argument. Tolling arguments are terrible. Have to show extraordinary circumstances. It's very
Isn't
hard
that better
to win.
than letting it pass, though? Or not even asking to clarify the deadline? Or no?
There's nothing about the deadline that needs to be clarified. There is no the deadline. Anything that happened, if I have till midnight to file, right? So this case would be in the Northern District of Indiana. I have until midnight to file. If somebody called me up and said, file a complaint for Rick by midnight. Say, okay. And every claim coming out of something that happened 2 years ago, from 2 years ago yesterday up through yesterday, would be gone. Now, there's a continuing wrong thing, but I don't think it applies. The good news is there is a really good argument for tolling in Rick's case that I'm not going to go into the details of. But it's a really good argument. I've checked it out with some civil rights lawyers, and they say I'm at least not crazy. And, with tolling, because the standard get tolling is so demanding, that's about all people can say. It's not crazy. But I think there's a good shot that Rick could get tolling because of certain things that have happened.
The other question that came up a lot that I didn't know how to answer and was trying to at least find, I didn't really even know who to ask to try to find out. But, when you're saying there's no actual deadline, that's like, even just saying that is helpful, because that was what I think a lot of the panic was coming from, where people were like, if somebody could just say there's not one, or that it hasn't been passed, that would have eased a lot. But even still,
It is an actual, it is, there is an actual deadline. It's just a deadline running every day.
Right. And that was going to be my next thing is, so then, because it says from the date of the injury, I guess is how the way I remember case text wording it. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's just the term I remember them using. But like when it comes to the Wallace stuff, even, and the involuntarily and like medicating him, all of those things, there was an argument in trial about when that actually occurred. Like even the juror thinks it happened in May, but according to all of the other testimony, it happened in April. And so April, if I think that's why people, especially in April, were like, is it or is it not? Like, is this going to come by? Like, I wouldn't know, but
the fundamental federal claim is really simple, and it just breaks my heart that people wouldn't just let me file the damn thing back in April, late March even. And this is no secret. I told everybody what the claim was, and nobody else was filing it. So why not have me do it? Fundamental claim is this, and it comes out of a 1979 U.S. Supreme Court case called Bell v. Wolfish. And this is almost a direct quote from the case. It is a due process violation to keep pretrial detainees in conditions that amount to punishment. It is not complicated. It is not. Now, there are a whole bunch of pendent state. Actually, they're called what? Now they're called they're called supplemental state claims now. When I was in law school, they were called pendent state claims, but they're called supplemental state claims now.
Thank you, Michelle.
There are a whole bunch of state claims you can add on to the federal claim, but that's the fundamental federal claim, and it would have. It really just would have taken putting the facts together in a narrative form, in a series of rhetorical paragraphs. It happens all the time, and the claim would have been in without having to argue equitable tolling.
Well, there's also that one instance that I've been stuck on for a while, but don't really know what to do with it, other than one of the, I think the first time I saw it was in the 3-day hearing notes when Walla testified. And then it was very vaguely mentioned in one of the media reports from trial. And I don't remember if it was from the day Walla testified or Martin, but basically somebody went to go interview. It says that it was in Walla's notes. I think Martin was asked about it, though. It might have been the issue. But essentially, he was punished for refusing to leave the rec area for an interview. That was the way it was phrased and reported in the notes, that he was already in trouble. He had already lost privileges because he refused to leave the rec area. And the reason they gave for why they were trying to get him to leave was an interview. I don't even know who would have been trying to interview him. I don't know if that meant with the warden because he requested an interview. I don't know if that means attorneys or if it was murder sheet when they were trying to call to get him to give statements. But still, like that, even something like that, I know some people think that's not a big deal, but I mean, he was being punished for, something as little as that to as great as not really wanting to take whatever they were giving him. He didn't know what they were giving him. When Librado and Scrimmin went to go visit him, in the affidavit of their investigator, she put in there that he was basically trying to catch them up on what's been going on. And he told her that they shot him through the cell door with basically like a tranquilizer to give him a shot.
And all that would have to be sorted out in a civil case. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what more to say. And by the way, I see Travis Williamson is in the chat, and
Hello, Travis.
I really invite him to call me out if I've said anything that's like off base or wrong. But it wouldn't have been hard to do. I don't know what people are thinking. Obviously, the idea that, let's assume that some other malefactors are right, that it would be a $50 to $100 million case. I want to know where the civil rights lawyers are taking the case if it's so obvious that it's a $50 or $100 million case.
That's what I'm saying. Like, where are the civil rights lawyers stepping up? Like, where are they?
Well, when there was Crazy Christie saying in chats that when Kara and I were being initially shunned, that lawyers of national reputation are going to be coming along. Yeah, they haven't shown up either. So I don't know I don't know what's going on. I do have an email out about some stuff. Dave Cloutier saying, y'all got to do this. I was told I was going to get an answer, but I haven't gotten one yet. But I will, I expect.
I think I just need to know that there's going to be some accountability, because the way they did all of this is hard to even process, let alone like you just want to see accountability for the way he was treated. Like, I don't care if it comes in the form of a civil suit or what, but like
the civil rights.
I just want to see accountability. I think is my thing that really eats at me.
The civil rights violation should be front and center in this case. The 13 months in solitary, when their own written rules say no more than 30 days, and they're trying to sideswipe that rule by saying, well, it's different because he was under a safekeeping order. All of that, I think that for me, people in this country need to wake up and realize that just because I like to help somebody that I feel has been wrongfully convicted, I don't like not being able to trust law enforcement, and I don't like being able to distrust our justice system. And it's situations like this where I think that some people just schluck it off and they go, oh, well, if they couldn't do it, they wouldn't do it. If it's not legal, it wouldn't be done. And when you're dealing with a small community where they feel like everybody's on the same page and everybody is willing to sweep the rules and the laws under the carpet, this is a prime example of them getting away with actual murder. They might as well have sentenced him to death, because 130 years is exactly that. His life is over. It's gone. And this should not be innocent before proven guilty. that should always be the narrative. Well, how do we go from that to sweeping him off into solitary confinement in a maximum security prison and leaving him in solitary confinement for 13 months? And regardless of factual information, there are reports of other inmates who witnessed, wrote letters, and who slept in the cell beside Rick Allen, who claimed that they were encouraged by the guards to harass and torture this man every day, every week, every month. And if they didn't do it, they would lose their commissary, they would lose their privileges.
Yeah. Well, people are like in some cases, I feel like some people are pretending like we all don't know exactly what happens to people accused of crimes against children when they go to prison.
Exactly.
And they're trying to act like, well, prove it. I'm like, I mean, we need to prove the exact instances, but like they proceed as if it's even up for debate that things like that did occur or not, when we know it did. Like, they were taunting him. And there's even that one recorded phone call from someone who called from the prison. It was like in November of 2022. There was like, yeah, Richard Allen's in here, and people are yelling at him, and I mean, they were just telling the truth, and that ended up bearing out. It took 2 years for it to come out, at least even a little bit, through the actual process. But like, we had already known that, but people were still acting like it was debatable. It's crazy to me.
Right. And no, a civil suit is not going to get him out of prison, but
hang on, Amy. I disagree. It may well, and that's the other reason civil suit. And I've explained this again over and over to quote the people who matter, because they are the ones who matter. That out of the discovery will come the communications between Westville and Carroll County, the state police, Doug Carter, anybody, the commissioner, and we don't know what happened there.
That would be phenomenal.
And it's incredibly important for Rick's criminal situation. And it's heartbreaking that the stuff is being ignored.
Well, the way she posted, it was in relation to Matt Black's request for the Cass County video that was denied. She posted something that was unrelated, but the way I understood it, I guess could still apply, was there's different parties to a civil case. Like, the barrier to get discovery is like you have to prove different things, but it's also not as contentious where it's an elected sheriff and an elected judge against a defendant and some defense attorneys. It's just a different dynamic. It's a different set of, I don't know if barrier is the right word, or criteria in order to request and justify whether you can receive it or not, whether they can compel it or not. And in some ways, it's easier to get discovery through civil cases that they could just turn around and then share with the criminal defense that would assist a future, I guess, PCR, PCI, whatever it is. Like, there are things that it could also be useful for. And I guess I had never heard that or considered that before she said it, but like, I feel like there's more than one good reason to keep that lane open, at the very least.
Well, Travis has written in the chat discovery, but discovery supervised by a federal judge, and I'm not worried about that, because those communications would all go to whether it was intentional conduct or not.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a state claim that would go along, which is intentional infliction of emotional distress, which pretty clearly happened, and that's for outrageous conduct. And it would actually go to the intentionality. It would even go to damages. So my position on the federal claim, at least, not the involuntary medication, maybe, not the intentional infliction of emotional distress, but to the fundamental constitutional due process claim about keeping him in conditions that amount to punishment.
Mm-hmm.
On liability, Brad Rosie had those videotapes and the trial test, the courtroom testimony, I mean, both at hearings and at trial, Travis can disagree with me, but I say it's a lay down win on liability for at summary judgment. So,
Michael, let me ask you this: so in a case like this where Rick is the defendant and he's the one who experienced this treatment, what is the process for filing representation in a civil suit on his behalf? What is the process for that? Is that
he'd have to be incompetent, and I'm not going to go there. He'd have to be incompetent.
No, I mean if an attorney in Indiana wanted to step up and file this civil suit on his behalf,
he'd have to agree to it. Unless he's
Okay.
incompetent. You can't file as somebody's next best friend. I mean, you can't just go filing civil suits for people because they're saying no, or they're not saying anything, or they're not allowed to say anything.
Okay.
Kathy could probably file one on his behalf if she wanted to. Hell, she has his power of attorney, of course. I mean, it's a real simple situation. There just has to be a lawyer willing to do it, and somebody has to say, okay. It's not complicated, folks. And I have no reason to think, as others have said, that Kathy hates me. But for whatever reason, they don't want to do it, and they get to make that decision. I violently disagree that shouldn't be done. If they don't want me doing it, find somebody else. Believe me, I've said, find somebody else. I'm happy to be gone. I'll help somebody else draft the complaint.
Look at Eagle Eye's question on the screen, Michael.
Actually, I'm in the comments, so why don't you read it?
Where did it go?
It says, is Kathy the only person who can file? What about Rick's mother or Brad and Andy talking to Rick? Can Rick file? Is that the one you're talking about from Eagle Eye?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Rick can always file pro se. I mean, and he can always give his assent to somebody, a lawyer actually doing it. That creates, somebody actually representing him. I don't. There have been discussions about, regardless of. I don't know whether Kathy could file regardless of what Rick wants or not. I mean, that power of attorney is authorization to, file a civil suit. I have no idea whether that would be covered. Look, everybody's complicating it. It's not complicated.
I don't think it's really that complicated. I mean, I've never thought it was that complicated. That's why I'm confused as to why we're actually still even having these conversations and there's no movement one way or the other. And it's not because, curious minds just want to know. I think that we all have an emotional investment in this case, and we believe Rick is wrongfully convicted, and we want to do something about it. And I feel like we're doing the best that we can. I feel like our hands are tied at the moment, and it's stressful because what a lot of us do getting up every day, I think for the majority of us, especially us creators, and I know that you, Michael, get up every day with an agenda of what we're going to focus on today, what can we find today that's going to help him. And I sometimes feel like I'm beating my head against a brick wall because I feel like my efforts are just being discounted. I don't have to know everything. I don't need to know anything other than something is happening and things are moving forward. And just because people that we don't know are saying, well, yeah, it's happening. We know on paper, legally, notification wise, on the docket, we're not seeing anything. That's
Well,
frustrating.
like, so I've said it. I think I've said it on at least in chats on some lives. Maybe I've said it on some lives. You, Amy, are doing terrific work. There are a dozen other people I know of who are doing terrific work, and
Mhm.
I'm slogging along as best I can. And we'll see. The good news is that I think that some stuff has been developed that is extremely helpful and reason to have a fair amount of optimism. Uh, and when optimism about what? I think optimism that maybe the whole state's whole house of cards will get knocked down, but it's not going to be any one thing. It's going to be sort of three or four devastating things, and how they're used. And there are always four questions with a case, and they're, where are you? What do you want? Where where are you going to go to get it? And how are you going to get it?
Mhm.
And there we know where we are. Broadly speaking, we're in post-conviction and appeals going. What do you want? You want Rick's convictions reversed? Where do you want to go to? Where do you want to go to get it? There are a bunch of places. There's the Court of Appeals and the appeal. If you develop enough stuff, there's a so-called Davis petition, and you suspend the appeal. But you can also go to Nick McClelland and say, "Hey, Bob, look at this, and this. Want to do something about it?" And if he doesn't, then you publicly burn him.
And I mean, and I think for me personally, you know, going back through everything on the vault, and we are open to, okay, here's what we are left with right now, this timeline. And I mean, for example, All Eyes, commented, hey, we have some discrepancies. Well, let's deal with them. Let's figure out where the discrepancies are so we can eliminate the junk and we can correct the timeline and get down to the bare bones of what happened on February 13th. And I feel like having that solid evidence on top of many other things, the van video, the white car video, the Betsy Blair Fitbit data that's not syncing up with what the state presented and the defense didn't challenge. We're not only dealing with the Hoosier Harvest Store camera times being off, but now there's two cameras, and there's also a third camera across the street at Anderson's that was never discussed. There's all of these things that we could lay right at the doorstep of Nick McClelland and expect him to be a oath-abiding lawyer and do the right thing. And
Hilarious. He
exactly.
won't. They've already
won't.
closed the case. They didn't solve. Like, it's just
I
so
mean,
depressing.
that is the fight that I have in, because
Maybe he'll
I
develop a
know,
conscience.
well, I think that he's willing to die on that hill. I
Yeah.
think that he's willing to die on the hill that he's right, and the case that he presented is rock solid, when it's an actually complete shattered piece of glass just waiting for the wind to blow the wrong way and it crumble. I mean, there's so many things in this case, and I'm compiling a list. So everybody stay tuned, because I will be releasing a list of epic fails, lost discovery, misleading statements, lies, back-turning, contradictions, lying on the stand list. And I'm going to make it available for everyone to add to it, something that I've left off, and we're going to see what we end up with in this case, and how you can have this many mishaps and this many F-ups in one case that took almost 8 years to get a conviction on. It's not like they were, up against the clock.
Yeah, they've had almost a decade. That
Almost,
is like when
yeah.
people talk about how it's been 7 years or 8 years, I'm like, that's closer to a decade than not. They've had more than enough time to do stuff, and we're finding out that they didn't even do stuff that, like, we're not specially trained for this, and we have some of the most basic questions that they never even bothered with. They're supposed to be the professionally trained investigators, and there's very simple things they just didn't do. It's hard for me to make sense of that sometimes, because they either just, I don't know if they assumed someone else did it, or if they were literally all just running around taking each other's words. But to me, it looks an awful lot like the more we learn about the early days, especially with Buckley and Holman, they're just running around explaining things away to everybody else, because they were, at that time, they had become supervisors to all the investigators. So they would have these investigators come to them, and then they were the ones who would turn around and go brief people like Doug Carter. And so they all, if one person along that chain of, like, the line of authority, you misrepresent one thing along the chain, even if it's not intentional, you can knock the whole thing off track. But none of them were just verifying even basic stuff just for the sake of, like, having each other's back. Even like when people send me stuff, I don't just immediately turn around and do it. I go ahead and look it up, even if it's someone I believe and trust and know to be pretty responsible and diligent. I still check it, and it's not because I don't trust them or I don't trust anybody. It's just like, why not? It doesn't take that long to double check and to make something solid. It's just like
you don't want to put out, like, I think that's the gut punch when, like when I do an episode of The Vault, and then somebody comes to me with something that I've never seen before, or they align it in a way that I've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Guess who just showed up?
Well, Sergio, welcome to detention for being late. Just kidding.
Hey.
So I apologize. I'm late. I've been working on a different case, and about.
Did you lose track of time?
What's that? Yeah, honestly, I've been waiting for this to come on here all night, and then I had just an epiphany on the other case that I'm working on, and I just fell down a rabbit hole, and I apologize.
That's all right. Well, like I said earlier, it makes me feel better because I do it all the time, a lot. It's usually mixing up the days, but I lose track of time all the time.
Well, it's a thrill to meet you, sort of in person, Sergio, and I'm going to hop off now that the star has arrived. I'm a pretty sad opening act.
Thanks, Michael. I'll see you later.
I'm going to hop down too, so y'all can catch. I don't know if y'all are going to start or do like a halvesies, but either way, I'm going to hop down and chat too, and I'm going to listen.
All right. Thanks, All Eyes, for coming up.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hi.
Hi. So, is your
Whoops.
So is your? I'm sorry for jumping in so late here. So where are you at here in the?
Well, I'm looking for my notebook. So we didn't get started. I figured that you got tied up. So I made plenty of excuses for you.
I'm sorry about
that. No, I think that we've got a full house now. We were just chatting about the legal system and the case in general and all of that good stuff. So I will kick us off with my notes. And first of all, I wanted to say, you had asked for a preference of your narrative style versus your older style.
Yeah.
I like them both, but if I had to choose, I would say the old style. I think it's more explanatory.
Yeah. When I went back to that, I thought it's more natural for me to talk that way too. Like it's when I'm not trying to do the narrative style, I focus a lot more on what I'm good at. Like storytelling
Mhm.
is not what I'm naturally good at. So yeah, as I was able to concentrate more on the actual analysis and describing what was actually happening, I could tell too. That's definitely it's a easier way to get the information across, I think.
Mhm. And Kelsey is she's a very touchy subject in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you've done part one and part two, before we get into her analysis of the second half that you did, do you have on her just an overall opinion about, well, let me ask you this. I know that you picked up on a lot of different deceptive things, more so about things that she was keeping from law enforcement, things that she knew that the girls might have been up to that she wasn't forthcoming about. Do you think that, and keeping in mind that the interviews that you watched were done, some were done a year, maybe even 2 years after the case had been, the girls had been found. Do you feel that she's still withholding information? That that's something that she's kept bottled up?
Um, so I don't know anything. I don't know other information about how much of that information has come out. So when I'm
Mhm.
watching those videos that she did, I don't know a whole lot else about information that the police know at this point or don't know. I literally just got all of my information from the Kelsey interview and the Keegan Klein interview. So I drew that connection between them there because I had already done Keegan Klein.
Mhm.
I don't even know whether she has actually told the police or not that she was in contact that night, other than they know because of the phone records, but I don't know if she's actually told them.
Okay.
So if she hasn't, then yes, she is still withholding that information. But if she has gone back in there and told them about that after the fact, I think that is the information that she has. I don't, I
Okay.
don't, I don't think there's any more information that she has other than that.
So there's so let me we'll go I'm going to go through some of the notes that I have um, um, with your second analysis, and we'll just kind of touch base. And I actually have your video uploaded here
Okay.
to play certain parts if we need to. But the whole, when she was talking about the search,
Yeah.
and she was talking about feeling defeated, and she was describing the reasons why they called off the search, and you honed in on the word just, um, and you said there was more to it. I got kind of the sense that you were picking up on that there was more to it than just being a rough terrain. Was it possibly that maybe she had alluded to the police that the girls could be out joyriding or doing whatever, and that was why they called off the search, because there wasn't such an imminent danger in their minds at that time, because she said, I think she used the word, I was defeated, or you honed in on something about the search. I
Yeah.
forget what the words were verbatim.
Yeah. So during the search, sorry, my kids are in the background. I don't know if you can hear them,
I
but
can, yeah.
during the search, there's a period right before they call off the search that she gets real sensitive. And
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like, and I would have to look at that or have you play it, but it seemed like she may have told the uncle at that point that they might be in more danger than people think, because the way you described it, I think it might be the opposite, the other way around. I think the police, when they started the search, were thinking they're just lost in the woods somewhere, like they'll be fine for a night. Where Kelsey had a more sense of urgency there. Like she didn't want to stop the search because she knew that there was that Anthony Schatz was part of this, and so she was conflicted there in that she didn't want to admit that she knew that there was a much higher, much greater danger to those to her sister than the police were aware of. So she was definitely withholding at that point, and I think that's why it was so hard for her. She made a lot of comments about how defeated and how she felt about the police ending that search. So I don't think she told them something that made them end it. I think she withheld information that would have made them keep it going all night.
Okay. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can pull that up here really quick and play.
Actually happening there, and the words start to stumble. That's a sensitive area, and I don't know why. All right, let's look at the next section here.
We're looking underneath the bridge, and as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up.
Oh, that's too far ahead. Hold on, sorry.
My opinion, of course, which is why you get this verbiage here, which is why they called off the search. Now, had the girls been murdered at, say, 5 o'clock in the morning, then I would say that Kelsey's selfish reasons of not wanting to get in trouble and not wanting people to know that she knew that they were meeting someone and she didn't tell anybody about it, then that would have played a role. But because at this point, based on the forensic evidence, it's believed that Abby and Libby had already been killed at this point, this becomes irrelevant information. It doesn't change the intent of Kelsey to not tell the police that they were meeting somebody, but it doesn't end up having anything to do with what happened to the girls. So now that we're clear on that, we'll continue here. Next, she says, that was really defeating knowing that the search was called off. That's important verbiage there. Defeating is a weird way of saying that. And by weird, I mean, you just don't hear that a lot, which means Kelsey is using that word and she's assigning a certain meaning to it. And we need to figure out what exactly she means by that. She says it a couple more times later. So we're going to compare those statements later once we've seen how she uses that. But notice here, she says, that was really defeating. She doesn't say, I was defeated. She's not placing blame on herself at this point. She's placing blame on the police. And notice, the police are making decisions based on having a lack of information at this point because of the information Kelsey hasn't told them. So then
So at this point, do you feel that the information that she's not told them, when we get into the HLN interview down the road where she's driving in the car and you were throwing in there that, driving the car and answering questions might be more complicated where you get more of a truthful answer. Do you feel like, I'm just curious as to your thoughts of her person, like her verbiage in that HLN interview versus the earlier interview where she's talking about how she felt about them calling off the search. Because I just feel like there's information that she may have been withholding, that she's still withholding in order to, not that she's responsible for the girl's death, but maybe that she knew it was such a bad situation that she left the girls in, that she didn't want to be held responsible for not making the big sister decision to stop it from happening.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what I was saying in there, is that she, in that moment, had to make a decision of whether she was going to fess up and say, look, there's a bunch more information that you need to know, and you need to keep this going all night because we need to find them. Or, that fear of getting caught, of knowing what was going on and not telling anyone and not saying anything or doing anything. She had to make that decision at that moment. there, and she was hoping that she wouldn't have to make the decision. A lot of times people will opt for the easy way out. They'll opt to, like that philosophy question of, if there's somebody on the tracks on one side and you got 5 people on the tracks on the other, are you going to pull the lever to save 5 people but make the decision to kill that other person? A lot of times people won't make the decision to actively do something. They'll wait to see if the universe just bails them out.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had this information that she was withholding, and she was hoping that the police would make the decision to search all night and find him. And then when they called it off, she had to make a decision at that point of whether she was going to say something or not. And she very intentionally made the decision not to tell anyone at that point.
That's I think that's what we all believe, is that she made the decision not. There's
And there's something else about the woods. I have no idea, because she doesn't go into that. She says she stumbles on that, and then I remember hearing someone say something about seeing a deer or something. I don't know what the relevance of that is to the case, but
I'll explain that. I do have that notated here in my notes about the woods, and I hope I have it marked correctly to get there to play it. And this should be it, where she starts talking about she knew the girls were in trouble. But here's a little tidbit that I wanted to throw in before we go there. So here, did Kelsey lie? And these are some of the things that I went over in my vault episodes about some contradictions that Kelsey had made. There was some, supposedly she went to the boyfriend's house. She claimed that she was cleaning out the truck, washing the truck. You got the perception that there was some hanky-panky going on at the boyfriend's house.
Yeah.
There's still, it is still literally up in the air whether Kelsey went to work or didn't go to work, because when you listen to Becky, which is the grandmother claims that she, in an interview, she claimed that she called Kelsey at work and had her leave work. But we know, based on what Kelsey has said, was that Kelsey was still at the boyfriend's house when she got the phone call and didn't go into work. That's just these are the little things that have just kind of snowballed over the years, that no, it doesn't make her a murderer, but why all of the inconsistencies?
I have a theory on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Just remembering back to being 17, I'm going to say that at the moment when Grandma called, I have a feeling Kelsey probably, based on what she was doing there, probably told her grandma that she worked at 2 or at 3 and was probably going to drop them off at 1:30 and go straight to work, or maybe stop by her boyfriend's house and then go to work. But I have a feeling that she didn't want to explain that she was going for a few hours to hang out with her boyfriend's house. So when she called her grandma back, I'll bet you anything that she told her grandma that she's at work. And she was actually at her boyfriend's house. So when she talks about it in the interview, she tells them that, yeah, I was, leaving my boyfriend's house or whatever. I didn't get any sense that she wasn't actually at her boyfriend's house.
So do you find it like normal when you're doing these types of analysis of people that they will continue such an unnecessary narrative or an unnecessary lie? Like, to me, like all bets are off. My sister was abducted and murdered. When the dust settles and I sit down in front of the camera for the first time to speak about that day, I'm just going to be completely honest, because at this point it doesn't matter. Do you find that people will still hold on to a lie or a narrative that doesn't really equate to the situation one way or the other? Because if that's what she's done, she's really kind of dug herself a hole in the public eye, and that's an unfortunate thing, being in the situation that she's in. But unfortunately, in a case like this high profile, she's going to be scrutinized.
Yeah. Okay, so to answer that question, I would say there's a few different like personality types. There's not an infinite number of personality types. Most people think that they're completely unique individuals. No one is a completely unique individual, right? Every personality trait that anybody has is shared with millions of other people.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't only one personality type either. So in adults, you're going to get people that are going to cling to a narrative for a particular reason, or other adults, like you were saying, if that happened to my sister, for me, yeah, at that point where I know something is wrong, nothing else matters. But not everybody's that way. And kids are the same way. I would say there's probably more kids that have that little more self-centered and self-serving attitude. And that's sort of something you usually grow out of on average. Not definitively, and not everybody by any means, but everything is sort of on a spectrum here, right? And I think
Mhm.
Kelsey is the type of person that had what am I looking like? She wanted to be valued in other people's eyes. She had that desire to be looked up to, which stems from a sort of a lack of real strength of character within. So,
Okay. So would it make a difference if I told you, and I'm this is speculatory based on information that I was provided in regards to the relationship between Abby and Libby from someone near the family, that Libby was always the happy-go-lucky, outgoing, bubbly, likable girl. And even though Kelsey was the older sister, Kelsey always felt like she was in Libby's shadow. And I don't know how truthful that is, but I do feel like that there was maybe an incompetence situation going on with Kelsey, and um, Libby was a little bit more. Libby had a little bit more boisterous personality. Um, so I don't know if that had something to do with it. Kelsey wanting to, I don't know, take the reins of Libby to a certain degree. And when all of this happened, she may not have been willing to admit that Libby dominated her by saying, "This is what I'm going to do, whether you like it or not." And Kelsey really wasn't able to refute that. She wasn't able to stand up to her little sister. That's kind of the impression that I get, especially when when you throw out the undertones of what you are picking up going on in the car ride on the way to the bridge. And basically, you've got the older sister telling the younger sister, "This is not what you should be doing," yada, yada, yada. And the little sister's like, "I don't care what you say. I'm doing it anyway." Getting out of the car, walking away, slamming the door. Then we have these unvalidated reports of there being a witness that saw Kelsey and Libby screaming at each other in the Mears lot. So it just, what are you, how does that correlate with you?
yeah, I mean, so in situations like this, I try to put myself in those situations as best I can. Try and remember what did I feel like when I was a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, I was very, very shy. I was very passive, very timid, and I was always jealous and sort of looked up to people who were charismatic and popular. And I can definitely see that element there where Kelsey's going to get what her opinion. She knows that her opinion is going to be just an opinion to her sister. Like, I don't think she even has the ability, like you said, to put her foot down and say, no, this isn't going to happen. Like if Libby said that she wanted something and that she was just going to go ahead and do it, I think it would be, I think Kelsey's primary concern would be not to look bad in Libby's eyes, not to have her look down on her, actually, because there's always, I mean, if you're looking for that type of affirmation, then it's very difficult to stand up to somebody else who's more outgoing. At least it was for me. And I see that sort of same dynamic there where, you know, she had an opinion that was obviously dumb. That was a bad idea to go meet some guy on the internet there. But I really got the impression from this that in the end, Kelsey's decision process, it wasn't about stopping Libby. It was about, do I tell, you know, my grandparents or my dad? Like, she didn't have the ability to stop it herself. So actually you could see in the lead up there, she was trying to put obstacles in Libby's way. She's like, well, I'm not going to take you. And then after talking to her for a while, she's like, fine, I'll take you, but I can't bring you home, knowing that her dad had to work and that her grandma couldn't drive or didn't have the car or something like that. And she thought she was putting an obstacle there where she would just block her from going. And then, of course, Libby goes and talks to them and figures out a way home, figures out to get her dad to pick her up on the way home. And in the end, you get this decision point where Kelsey has to decide, is it more important that my sister likes me or that I do what I think is going to keep her safest? And in the end, that's never a real decision for a kid. Like, if I told you there's a 1 in 100 million or a 1 in a billion chance that you're going to get murdered here, and there's a 100% chance that if she tells the parents, Libby's going to ostracize her for the rest of her life. Like, they're at a very pivotal point there, 14 years old and with boys and stuff. She knows, like, that's it. She's socially dead with Libby if she doesn't do this. And so she made a decision there that is going, in my opinion, that decision is going to haunt her and destroy her, especially if she doesn't get professional help. I think somewhere around 30 years old, she's going to have a crisis.
Well, I'm going to play this part about the woods, and then I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit, and take you down another version of Kelsey that I want you to give me your opinion on. But let's go. I think it is here. At the stage.
There, and the words start to stumble. That's a sensitive area, and I don't know why. All right, let's look at the next section here.
We're looking underneath the bridge, and as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up the hill that they found a shoe. And knowing that I dropped the girl,
police are making decisions based on having a lack of information at this point because of the information. This becomes irrelevant information. It doesn't change the intent of Kelsey to not tell the police that they were meeting someone.
And the others stayed behind to look on the wood.
There we go.
A negative statement, but I didn't. Whenever you put I in front of didn't, there's personal commitment there, and likely she really didn't sleep that night. All right, let's look at the next section of her statement here.
We got up the next morning and we headed out to look again. We were all put into groups, and then
Sorry, I completely missed the mark. I wanted to go. We might have to just skip that part. Let's go to 8:30. Let's go to 8:38, where she's talking about.
Anytime people are repeating words, it means that there's more going on in their mind, and their mind has stopped thinking about the words and is thinking about what is actually happening there, and the words start to stumble. That's a sensitive area, and I don't know why. All right, let's look at the next section here.
We're looking underneath the bridge, And as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up the hill that they'd found a shoe. And knowing that I dropped the girls off and I remembered what they were wearing, I knew exactly what shoes my sister and Abby were both wearing. So as soon as they yelled up what type of shoe it was, I knew exactly whose it was.
So she says, and we were looking underneath the bridge, and as soon as we'd gotten back to the private drive, somebody yelled up the hill that they'd found a shoe. Okay, that is just narrative information there. There's nothing deceptive. She says we, so she's still committed and feels part of this group. Then she says, and knowing that I dropped the girls off and remembered what they were wearing, I knew exactly what shoes my sister and Abby were both wearing. Okay, so we have a couple.
So that was the one thing that I had on here that I wanted to bring up, because there's always been a discrepancy in one. Becky Patty claimed that she told the girls before they left to put on warmer clothes. And Kelsey had stated that when she got to the trail at the Mears lot to drop the girls off, that she made Libby put on a sweatshirt and she let Abby put on her jacket. But we know from the photo in the car right here that Abby already had on the jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Did we look at this picture last time on the first analysis?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. You've showed me that picture before.
The looks on their faces, it seems like there's something going on that's uncomfortable in the car. Because the way Kelsey described the car ride there was they had the windows down, they were playing music, they were singing and taking pictures, but this photo does not look like that's what was really transpiring. But you can see in this photo that Abby already had the jacket on. So you had said that she was being deceitful about knowing exactly what the girls were wearing. Why would that be something that she would even care to lie about?
So I think the reason is because she has a desire to be looked up to, not just by Libby, but just in general. She has a sort of I would say a lack of self-confidence, and she just wants to be seen as somebody who's important. And this is one of those pivotal moments where she can step in and people will look at her for information and for guidance here. And I think she really wanted to be able to step into that role. I think she bit off more than she could chew there in wanting to feel important for a minute.
Okay.
So, and then in the video, I talk about this too, but there's, and I talked to my wife about this. My wife has sisters, and I asked her about this, and she's like, well, I can tell you every piece of clothing that my sister ever owned. Like, she's like, I used to sneak into her room and steal stuff and wear it, and then try and get it back in there before my sister would get home. And it doesn't surprise me at all that Kelsey would recognize the shoe immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But it also doesn't surprise me that she would step up in that time and say, oh yeah, I knew exactly what they were wearing. I dropped them off, and want to play the hero there.
Okay. I'm checking the chat here.
And I also, while you're checking the chat, I want to make it very clear that I'm not making a statement that anyone in here is a good person or a bad person or anything like that. I'm just saying in reality, there are aspects of people's personality that cause them to make certain decisions. And this is very consistent. Every decision that Kelsey makes is based on trying to, it feels like somebody who is not popular, who has low self-confidence, wanting to get themselves into a situation where other people look up to them, like just wanting to feel important. And it caused her to make a bad decision. It caused that being not either stopping Libby herself, which I don't think she could have done to begin with, but not telling her dad or her grandma. And then when this whole thing came around, she still wanted to be that important person and see if she could save the day.
So with those like normal, I mean, I just kind of feel like those are normal attributes of a sister or an older sister. I was an older sister. I had a younger sister she was the rebellion of us, and I was always trying to mother hen her to a certain degree. So I get that aspect of it, but there's other things in here that you picked up on, that you felt was you described when she said, never would have imagined it would have been this. And you said there was a reduction of commitment there. And she was worried and didn't think it would be what it was. And you said that was also a reduction of commitment. So I feel like with this analysis, there's dips in Kelsey's demeanor where she's sincerely hurting as a sister and somebody who might be carrying the burden of somebody who participated in allowing Libby to make some really bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other aspects of Kelsey where you go, why are we seeing deception here? Like when, if I pull this back up, there was, and the reason it caught my eye when you said it, is because I had typed this out. There was some issues back in the beginning where Kelsey couldn't really keep straight when Abby and Libby first went missing, and she went out to the Monon High Bridge, and she said that her and her uncle Cody crossed the bridge. And you had pointed out that they crossed the bridge and went down looking for the girls to the wooded area, and then something triggered them to turn around and come back. And the issue for me was Kelsey for a while never even could tell you who she crossed the bridge with. And at one point she said it was Cody, and then at another point she said she couldn't remember, and then it was, well, I had to figure out where my uncle Cody was. But it just seemed like, why is there all of these discrepancies on something that's so simple? And then why, when she crosses the bridge and they get down to the area of down the hill where her sister and them were taken, did you pick up on some sort of deception?
So in the part that you were showing with where she says the word never, the word
Mm-hmm.
never is almost always deceptive. It's a very problematic word. And the point that I was trying to make there is that she says that the worst case scenario is something that never occurred to her or something like that. I can't remember exactly how she phrased it, which is clearly, I mean, that should be clearly a lie. I mean, not a lie, but deceptive, right? I mean, the worst case scenario is literally what everybody thinks about, usually immediately. And especially her in that situation where she knows that that her sister is out there with someone else, some guy from the internet. Now, I think, and there's a difference between so in finding deception, it doesn't necessarily mean that I know exactly what happened. It just means that I know that there's issues with what she's saying right there.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, it felt like what she was saying was that even though she knew that he was there with a boy, I think she was stuck on the idea that the worst case, and I know we're not on YouTube right here, and I don't know how to be, if you want me to be super careful about saying words about
you go ahead. No.
I think in her mind that her sister getting raped was probably the worst case scenario for her. And
Okay.
I think that what she thought what she was going to find was her sister just ignoring her phone because she's with this hot guy and wants to spend time with him, and is like, as long as I got this guy's attention, I'm not going to answer the phone when my mom calls, or my grandma, or my dad, or whatever. So I think she was expecting to catch her sister in the act. I think in her mind, the worst case scenario was probably, like I said, like rape or some sort of sexual assault or something like that. When she says at that point, the worst case scenario never crossed my mind. Okay, so it has, of course, everybody does think that, but she probably was just saying that she didn't think that the murders were actually what was going to happen there.
Mhm.
It's a very generic way of, I don't know, it's something that everybody says, but it's deceptive when everybody says it, not just her.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I just wanted to point that out, that just because it's a generic thing that you say, that's actually pretty relatable in that situation. However, for her, I think very specifically, it was referencing that in her mind, even with Anthony shots, she still thought that that was a 1 in a million shot, that would actually be the outcome. Like actually that they were getting murdered.
Right. No, I agree. That does make sense. And I'm going to rattle off some questions or some key controversial things regarding Kelsey, and you can give me your opinion on each one. I already talked to you about the Cody and who she crossed the bridge with. So the sleepover. There's a little bit of a controversy about the sleepover because Kelsey portrays it as there was a sleepover with, she says, her and her friends, and then Abby and Libby were there, and Abby and Libby then went off and went painting. But based on other accounts, Kelsey spent the night with Bree Wilbur, which is her boyfriend's little younger sister. And there are some minute accounts of Kelsey being seen at Bree Wilbur's house that morning. So if that is actually the scenario, and Kelsey's possibly lying to her grandparents that I'm spending the night with Bree, and maybe they're not aware that Kelsey is dating Bree's older brother. How does that change any perspective from you on your analysis of Kelsey and the type of the ability to lie, I guess? Because there's some people who are just diabolical, and there's some people who just lie for really no good damn reason.
Yeah.
So what about that?
Well, I can tell you, Kelsey is not diabolical. She's
okay.
I mean,
okay.
To be diabolical, you have to. I mean, okay, so there's a lot to this. The level of evil that a person is doesn't make them better liars. So
okay, that's
and the higher intelligence somebody is, or the lower intelligence somebody is, also doesn't make them better liars.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that I've seen that really truly impacts somebody's ability to lie is if they're in psychosis, either some drug-induced psychosis or where they are literally out of touch with reality, not figuratively. Like they are literally living in a different world at that moment. And diabolical means more. Diabolical people usually have tons of indicators of deception in their statements. Kelsey's statements are not loaded with deception, actually.
Okay.
I mean, there is a lot of deception in there, but if anybody was to write me, normally when I'm teaching, so what I'll do is when the class starts, back in the day when I was teaching, I would have everybody in the class write a statement. I'd say, write me a statement of either yesterday or a day in the very recent, within a week or two. And just pick a day when you did something that maybe you don't want your significant other or your spouse, whatever, your mom, whoever, someone to know about, and write me a statement about that day. And then I'm going to take all of these statements and just keep in mind that, anybody can see these statements. So, but I want you to write me a statement about that day.
Mm-hmm.
And these statements are just loaded with deception right around the time that people are trying to leave a little bit of information out where they did something. Even people that just pick a random day, even if I just say write about yesterday, you're going to actually have deception in there. And so diabolical people end up with places where they commit the crime that are loaded with deception. So the idea that Kelsey is diabolical is sort of laughable to me, because there's no place in any of her statements where she's trying to cover up very much. And it's very clear that she has knowledge, obviously, of Anthony shots, and that she's trying to remove that from that entire day. And if you were to take that out, the rest of her statement probably wouldn't change. You'd end up with a lot of sensitivity around being at her boyfriend's house, things like that. The case that I was working on right now, actually, which is the reason why I was so late getting here, is diabolical. And when I figured out what was going on there, it's like I went into a different world for a while. Went down the hole, because those people truly are diabolical. And their statements don't look anything like Kelsey's. So you watch the next video that comes out, and you'll be like, oh, if I compare that to Kelsey's, yeah, Kelsey looks like the same. But I guess what I'm getting at is, the idea that Kelsey could have spent the night somewhere else, her language doesn't support that. She was very truthful about being there. Now, that's up to a point. At the point where the girls went painting, she doesn't really talk much about after that. So did she leave her house at 11 o'clock at night and go spend the night there? Possibly, sure. But the stuff that she talks about, that happened.
Well, since with doing, we're going into episode 12 on the vault that we're working on with the timeline and all of that. And we're just kind of going back through statements. And I feel our best resources are going to be things that we can dredge up from the beginning of the case. That's, where everybody was closely surrounded by statements that were made. And one of the things that we have is that Rayleigh Voorhees, which is one of the witnesses that was on the trails that day, who was with Bree Wilbur. Bree Wilbur is the younger sister of Kelsey's boyfriend at the time. And we had originally seen the information that Rayleigh Voorhees claimed that she saw Kelsey at Bree Wilbur's house that morning, because Voorhees went over to Bree Wilbur's to collect her, and they were going to walk to the trails. Well, initially I had thought, well, Bree had spent the night at the Patties with Kelsey, so maybe Kelsey took her home that morning. Well, going back through again and listening to these videos that I'm getting ready to upload this week in relation to a community meeting that was done by locals, the locals there were discussing the fact that Kelsey had spent the night at Bree Wilbur's. And so either storyline fits, Bree spending the night at Kelsey's and Kelsey taking her home is how Voorhees saw her there, or Kelsey spent the night at Bree's and she was still there when. Either way, it was just one of those things where, I have two daughters, and I don't really believe that either one of them would be brazen enough to lie to my face about who their boyfriend was and who their friend was, and they're going to sneak and go spend the night. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I wanted to throw that out there because I know that Kelsey has literally been scrutinized for good reason over the years, and I think that your analysis of her is very fair and accurate. And regardless to if she was aware of Anthony's shots and her sister doing some things that she shouldn't do, it doesn't mean that she was involved with the murder.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to the next phase of where you're going to go with this, the one last thing that I wanted to bring up was the fact that how do you feel about the fact if I was to tell you that Libby had been catfishing? I'm sorry, Kelsey had been catfishing Libby, pretending to be a boy that liked her.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
No? Okay.
the stuff that siblings do to each other is pretty vicious. But I mean, so in what I do, I think one of the hardest lessons for most people to learn, it wasn't that, if I'm being honest, it wasn't that hard of a lesson for me to pick up, but it's a hard lesson for most people to pick up, which is that if something doesn't pertain to the murder, then it doesn't pertain to the murder.
Okay.
If something, so in this case, the people want to make connections, and I get that. I totally get that. But catfishing your sister does not mean you murdered her. And it might make people think, okay, well, she had the intent to do it, or she's generally mean to her sister. But it seems to me, and this is just my opinion, my speculation, it seems like they were both sexually active. And if that's the case, I mean, that's a parenting problem, obviously, but if that's the case, they're that young and they're already sexually active. For one to be catfishing the other, it doesn't seem like that far-fetched. If my kids, that the most they do right now is play video games, but if one of them went in on the other one's account and stole some of their stuff on their video games, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And that's sort of the level where they were at. Like, it's hard for me to even comprehend that a 14-year-old is sexually active. Like, that just is mind-boggling to me. But if you are, and you're in that type of situation, then catfishing each other is like a normal Tuesday. It doesn't mean that you murdered somebody. So I want to keep the stuff that's related to the murder, and this stuff, if it's not related, yeah, it could be used as intent later. But I have to see something that's directly related in order for that to be motive or intent.
Well, I think from the public's perspective, as far as this is, the catfishing is not just a simple prank in this particular case. I don't, you know what? I don't think you've ever watched my episodes on here with Reese Davis,
No,
the inmate who was actually incarcerated with first Ron Logan and then Keegan Kline. I would love for you to do an analysis on him, but according to him, and according to what we can take away from some of the transcripts from Keegan Kline's interviews, is that there were nude pictures being sent back and forth, and at some point there might have even been some sort of financial compensation from Keegan Kline. So the catfishing element of it was beyond more than hey, I saw your picture online, you're cute. It went a little bit deeper than that. And the fact that shortly after the girls went missing, Kelsey immediately hopped on Libby's accounts and contacted Anthony Schatz and was inquiring if he had talked to Libby. So that kind of tells you that she was fully aware. And then further down the road, there, Libby had a tablet that was synced with her iPhone, and somebody was going in on the iPad and had deleted certain things. Now, could it be that Libby was sending nudes and Kelsey didn't want law enforcement to see it? I mean, I don't blame her there. To hear it, that things were deleted sounds worse than, I don't want that information about my sister being put out there. Is two different things. So I think that this is a really important analysis that you're doing is because Kelsey, it's kind of like, can we move on from this section of the case because we have so many pods of people of interests with real credible reasons to be involved in this crime. And Kelsey, I think, has told exaggerated stories. She's contorted the truth. Some of it to protect herself, some of it to protect her sister. But do I think that she had a motive to be involved in a murder? I don't think so.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely on that. And there's like a saying amongst men, or at least maybe younger men when I was younger, that men would call each other porn buddies. And what that means is, if I die someday, your job is to go to my house and clean out all of the porn and all of the, stuff like that, so that when my parents go to clean out my house, they're not confronted with, that more shameful aspect of my life, that kind of a thing. That's a, there's an element of that exists everywhere. So the idea that Kelsey jumped on her iPad or something to delete her own catfishing accounts or messages, and to delete some of the naked photos or something that Libby had on there, that is not abnormal either. That is something that, there's a motive for that, and the motive is to not look bad, but the motive isn't murder in that case. And like you said, I think there's so many other really strong suspects in this case. Plus, you put also together the idea that that one 17-year-old girl could control two 14-year-old girls and do that to them. There's just no way. And the people that say, well, there was the hair wrapped around her finger. Yeah, I mean, she drove there in her car. Like, that's called transference, where evidence gets transferred from one person to another. That's pretty basic, forensics 101. And, unless there's something like DNA scratches under her fingernails of her sister, then you want to go and look and stuff like that. But you want to pay attention. Don't dismiss the things that are truly problematic, and don't overemphasize the things that can be explained by something simpler.
Right. I mean, that's a good point to make. And that's why I wanted to go over these. There's probably 100 more, but we don't have time to go over all of them. I think that for the most part, everyone's getting the gist of it. And at the end of the day, I think everyone who is committed to wanting to get to the truth in this case has to realize that 50 people didn't commit this murder.
Right.
20 people didn't commit this murder. And as much as this is just one of those wild cases where there's so many possible POIs and possible different scenarios. And ultimately, I leave that at law enforcement's doorstep, because they should have nipped that in the butt right from the very beginning, instead of watching this case spiral out of control for years. But them allowing that to happen has allowed them to get away with pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, because no one knows what's true, what's not. I mean, we don't even have really a detailed, accurate timeline, and the ones that we were presented, we can find fault in them, which really, it's going to, I'm hoping that it's going to come back and haunt the shit out of them. And I'm just glad that the country, society needs to wake up to, it's not a comfortable feeling to think that you can't trust law enforcement or our justice system, but in some cases you absolutely can't.
Yeah, look at the Karen Reed case. That case is
Exactly, prime example. And no one would believe it if it wasn't on television.
Yeah.
And unfolding right in front of your eyes. No one would believe it. And that's another thing with this case. Everything was done in the dark for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the judge in this case being one of the supporters and participating in the experiment of Indiana courts being televised, and in the biggest case of her career, she shuts it all down, except for the one day where she boots the defense off the case. I mean, it's insane. So, okay, we'll move on because I know that, so we are done with Kelsey. And let me see here. We are moving on to Mr. Doug Carter. All right, so I'm going to play a little bit of this that you did. It's good. Yeah.
Right here. This statement is a cry for help. And regardless of what.
Hold on, let me get us there.
And as she gets older now and becomes an adult, the weight of what happened is going to crush her unless she gets very serious help here. So that's my takeaway from this. So the last thing that I want to touch on here, Kelsey does a podcast that she hosts, and she interviews Doug Carter, who is the superintendent of the Indiana State Police. And I thought, if she's the host, she's not the one answering questions here. You only get good information from the people who are answering questions. I mean, unless you're getting leakage, like in the case of the interrogator who was interrogating Richard Allen, and you get leakage that he had involvement in bad policing. So I figured, let's look at this. Let's see what we can see here. I don't think the questions are going to be softballs anyways, so we're not going to see anything about Kelsey. So let's take a look at that.
Really big rumor that the police are covering something up, which is not happening. And I think people could just look at the fact that the law enforcement is going with us to do all these things and realize that that's not what's happening. Like, they're putting so much effort into this. There's no way that they could be.
All right, so the question, and she's very nervous about asking the question, but she's talking about, is the Indiana State Police, of which Doug Carter is the superintendent, are they covering something up? That she gets around to it in a very non-confrontational way. But all right, let's see what he has to say on this.
Conversations.
Hold on. I need to go back and look at this again. He says, did he just say I? That was that's one of my biggest indicators. So let me look at that response again. Hold on. I promise you that's not happening. Okay. That alone is, I mean, I can't emphasize how big of a problem that is. We just looked at 2 entire episodes of Kelsey and didn't get one single indicator that she had anything to do directly with this. And now the very first thing out of Doug Carter's mouth is I. Hold on. Okay, let me see what else he has to say here.
I promise you on that's not happening. And while I'm here, there will be nothing of the like. Mm-hmm. And that's just a rumor. And that, today in today's world, it's easy to say something like that, but take a step back and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur. And it's just not.
Okay, let's analyze this. Okay, hold on. I got to get a transcript here. Okay. So here's the transcript of what he says. Let's go through this. He says, I promise you. He says, I promise you that's not happening. And it's 3 repeated words. While I'm here, there'll be nothing of the like. So he doesn't say that won't happen. He says, remember, okay, so when somebody uses like this, it's the same as me saying, you see this red ball in my hand that I'm not letting you really see? Take a bite out of this. It tastes just like an apple. That the only thing you know is that it's whatever I'm trying to feed you here is not an apple. And so when he says, and while I'm here, there'll be nothing of the like, that's very problematic. We have two massive indicators of deception. He doesn't answer the question. He doesn't say no. He says, I promise you that's not happening. So the answer comes at the end of the sentence, which is deception. So we have and, which is an indicator of sensitivity. Then we have of, which is an indicator of sensitivity. And then we have three hard indicators of deception here. Then he says, and that's just a rumor, just that reduction of commitment. So he doesn't say that's a rumor. He says that's just a rumor, which is an indicator of deception there. And that, because we don't know. If you say you have to actually know in order to say that. When somebody says that's what that literally means, is that I'm explaining or I'm talking to you about a very technical or difficult subject that you already know about. You have a lot of knowledge about that. And so instead of me re-explaining something that you already know, I'm just going to say So if we're watching a football game and you already know the rules to football, we watch football together, and I'm trying to explain how difficult of a situation there is. I'm like, so they got a personal foul, that takes you back 15 yards. Because the person does know. You don't have to explain everything about the rules there. You can just say and it skips over a bunch of stuff. When you ask somebody, is the police department corrupt? And they say, then that is an indicator of deception. Okay, and that today in that is sensitivity, but then we have today, and this right here is a repeating word. In today's world is, I guess, is a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that is another reduction of commitment. Don't want to use that anymore. So, and that so that's an indicator of deception. Today is an indicator of sensitivity. In is an indicator of sensitivity. Today's world is, I guess, a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that. And he's refusing to actually say. Again, this is the second time he has refused to say the accusation out loud, which is a massive indicator of sensitivity, of deception that I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel before. But if you're unwilling to state the accusation, then that is because of how close to home it hits. So then he says, but take, that's a repetition of a word, and it's a misstatement of a word. So it's two indicators of sensitivity right there. A step back. So this right here is a threat. Take a step back. That is leakage. It's what I normally call a confession. But in here, the other type of leakage like this, other than a confession, is a threat. Take a step back and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur. And it's just not. So the closest thing that you get here to a denial is not a denial. It is very specifically the lack of a denial. It's just is a reduction of commitment, not. So what do we actually have here? We have a hard indicator of deception. We have an indicator of sensitivity. While I'm here, there'll be nothing of. That's an indicator of sensitivity, of the like. That is a hard indicator of deception because he's not willing to repeat the accusation. And that's just a rumor, is a reduction of commitment. And that is a indicator of sensitivity. Today is an indicator of sensitivity. In is an indicator of sensitivity. World is, I guess, a reduction of commitment. Easy to say something like that, which is both a reduction of commitment and it's a refusal to acknowledge the accusation for the second time. But take, there's two indicators here because it's a repeated word and then there's a misstated word here. A step back is a threat, and think about what it would mean for that to actually occur is just a nonsense statement. And it 4 times is more than just an indicator of sensitivity. Just is an indicator of sensitivity. And not is the third indicator that's refusal of him to acknowledge the accusation. And the answer is at the end of the statement, which is a hard indicator of deception. How many words is this? 74 words. This entire statement is a lie. This entire statement is extremely problematic. Okay. Instead of turning this video into a Doug Harder video, I'm going to start the next video with a recap of what we saw right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a bunch of Doug Harder's statements. He's made a lot of statements, so I need to baseline him. I seriously doubt if this is his baseline, that he just repeats every word, but I'm going to dig deeper into this. I'm going to get his baseline, and I'm going to do a video where I analyze the statements that he makes. Well, you know what? About Richard Allen for sure, and anything about this case. So that'll be my next video. So
when you break it down like that, you literally, like, first of all, you realize that he absolutely said nothing at all.
Yeah.
He didn't answer anything in that other than take a step back. And I pretty much.
That's crazy. Like when I saw that, okay, so obviously I looked at that and I saw it and I went through that, and before I went on camera and did that, so I was sort of reenacting it. But that I was reenacting my exact thought process as I was going through that. Like I literally just went through it, and then I was like, I got to do this on camera, and yeah, that is insane. So that what you saw there is the difference between when I'm looking at Kelsey German, I have very little to look at there. It's very clear to me what she's withholding because it starts in the beginning, it runs all the way through to the end. You saw my autism just like go out into overdrive there because I was honed in on him right there. It's like a shark with blood in the water, right? When I find real deception, like that's what happens to me. I just go down that hole where, once I find something like that, it's like a dog with a bone there.
Wow. So do you need me to send you some more videos?
Yeah. So I will say that I have looked at a couple of videos and that statement there is just scratching the surface. I haven't seen a video from him yet that's going to disappoint. Like every video.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll send you some more, and I'm not going to keep you. It's going on 10 o'clock. I won't keep you much. I won't keep you later, but I truly appreciate you coming on, and I just think that this is it's a great asset to have on a case like this because there are so many different people involved, and there are so many people who have so many opinions about all of these people, and you and I need to probably get together behind the scenes a little bit so I can kind of feed you a little bit more. I've tried to let you, use your expertise and analysis regarding the case. I wanted it to just be, you true blue doing what you do. So
at this point, don't hold back. Just give me whatever you got there because I'm neck deep at this point. So we're all in.
All in. Okay. Well, I will message you or you message me. I'll send you some more clips. Thanks for stopping in. Great as always.
And I do want to say that, before I came on here today, I apologize for being late. I was working on the Dior murder case, or I should say missing person case.
I know.
Because they're going on the 10-year anniversary. And I figured it out 100% from start to finish.
She's so excited that you're working on this.
Yeah. I had all day. There was one piece that I could not figure out what was wrong. And I figured that out. And then I just went off the deep end with that, a little like I was on that video right at the end there. And that one's coming. And when you see that, you're going to be like, no, Kelsey was telling the truth. When you see this video coming out, you're going to see the difference between somebody who is deceptive in a diabolical way versus someone who has a secret that they're hiding because it incriminates them, but it's not part of the actual crime.
Right. Right. Well, if you got once you do the analysis and stuff, maybe she'll come on. You guys can come on here to discuss it.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get caught up with her case. That's her baby, and like that's her case. So maybe we'll work something out like that, because I think that everybody here is truly dedicated to Delphi, but sometimes we also need to focus elsewhere.
Yeah,
So.
every once in a while, you got to give yourself a mental rest and then go back with new eyes. Especially if you look at another case, it gives you a different perspective of how things can transpire sometimes.
Right.
That's one of the reasons actually why I like doing 2 cases at a time. So once the Karen Reed case ended, then I started doing that other case. Keeps me like sharp.
No breaks, huh? No breaks, just right on to the next.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will let you go, Sergio. Everybody in the chat, hang out for just a second. I'm going to address a couple of questions and give you some updates on what's coming up this week. But I don't want to keep Sergio any longer than we have to. So thank you.
All righty. I'll see you next time.
All right. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, guys. All right. So I know I missed some questions. So I had All Eyes. You want to come back up and talk? I know that you had some questions about the drop off of the girls. If you want to come back up, you got the link, or I can drop it again. Or if not, you just tell me what you want to address. I know that there's all kinds of different theories about this. Well, truth over verdict. I'm sorry. I mean, and you're welcome to share your opinion. And if you think that he's off base on that, I mean, are you that dead set on it being Kelsey and Bree involved in this case, and they're the masterminds behind this whole thing? Or do you think it's possible that it involves sex trafficking or drugs? Or there's a whole lot of other scenarios. I'm not committed to one theory. I'm just trying to put all the theories out there and make them make sense. They are absolutely, Candy. They are all good theories. Oh, by the way, the loudmouth cat, his name is Jacoby, aka Kobe. He's a mommy's boy, and when he was wanting up on my lap, and I was ignoring him, I'm sorry, because when he comes up here, he wants to stand up in my face and he wants to be rubbed, and now he's sitting here by my feet. He's a good boy. Yeah, I'm talking about you. He's a big black cat. Oh, Rochelle, thank you so much. Oh, can I add PayPal? Yeah, I have PayPal. You realize that since I started this channel, I had started a buy me a coffee and never checked it. Like, oh, there's a little bit of funds in here. Let me pay my StreamYard bill. Let me see what else. Do I think that Ellie had the family lie about certain things? I think that's that I can see that I see that in 3 different ways. I can see law enforcement lying to the family. I can see the family lying to law enforcement, and I can see them both lying to the public. There's something there's something with the patties that don't add up. And I guess what us as a community needs to understand that we've already had a trial. We've already had a trial, and what was presented at that trial, we are kind of locked into, unless we were to get a new trial where we start with a clean slate and new narratives can be presented. So a lot of the issues that we talk about in here, unless we have solid concrete proof that it's factually new evidence, it can't even be raised in post-conviction. Everything is contained in the record. See, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, so here's kind of a double-edged sword that we dealt with in Ashley Garth's case with post-conviction versus her trial versus direct appeal. So there was a letter. Hold on. All eyes. I'm not justifying those things, by the way, just trying to relay what law enforcement said about it. Okay, do I have to catch up? That's true. That's what I mean. Like, see, Rachel or Rochelle, these are things like that. That's like unnecessary lies. Why lie about the geocaching? And I think they were there like the day before. So truth over verdict, Lisa, where's the proof of life? Well, the phone data provides. So let's take your theory that the girls were killed in Libby's bedroom the day before on the 12th. Because I'm assuming that's where you're going with that narrative, because if there's no proof of life on the 13th. However, the phone data, despite what was portrayed at trial or what was discussed at trial, there's other things in the phone data that I am sure will correlate. Libby was utilizing her phone on the 13th. Now, if it wasn't, then you're talking about a deep, deep planning and conspiracy of somebody putting that phone in the car, driving it to the Mears lot, plugging it into a charger in the car, unplugging it from the car, getting out of the car, and traveling with the phone across the Monon High Bridge, because the Apple Health data and the phone data shows that that's where that phone was. Now, we can say all day that there's no solidification of anybody seeing the girls, but we don't have solidification of who was even seen at all. You've got Shelby Hicks, who testified that she saw two girls. You've got Betsy Blair, who testified that she saw two girls. You've got Kelsey saying she dropped the girls off. But nobody can emphatically identify the girls that they seen. So we are kind of stuck in a conundrum here of, are we going to just spin our wheels on those unvalidated facts, or can we take the facts that we know and put them to good use? I guess that might be where we differ in opinions. Okay. Oh, okay. All eyes. So no third party can come in to this next phase. So no, in the direct appeal, no, nothing new can come in on the direct appeal. The direct appeal is going to be based on the legalities of the case as a whole. the rulings by the judge, the motions filed by the defense, and the arguments that the appellate attorneys will be raising that the judge ruled with indifference or with bias or with prejudice against the defense. They're going to be able to raise a lot of issues from pre-trial motions up through the trial. However, they're going to have to, with this case, they're going to have to pick and choose their strongest points because they will be limited. I'm sure that they could possibly request additional words to be utilized in the direct appeal, but normally there's a limitation to how many pages or how many words they can use. Listen, everybody can hear you, okay? They've had it. You're driving their dogs crazy. Come on. So that's on the direct appeal. It's in post-conviction where new evidence can be raised and where other third-party stuff can come in. So, but things are, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know all of the ins and the outs of the law. So, for example, one of the big issues and hurdles that we had with Ashley's case is that Garrett Kurtz had been he was constantly writing letters to Ashley while they were in jail. They were in the same jail, just in different units, male, female, Newton County Jail. And she was passing these letters on to her attorney. And one of them where Garrett, he basically says that he killed Nicole and he wanted her to keep her mouth shut, yada, 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 yada. And then he also discusses that I know that you've been told that I've killed somebody else. That is true. Did I do it on purpose? I'm not going to discuss that right now, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, Ashley's defense attorney tried to get that letter admitted as evidence at her trial. And the judge denied it being allowed in as evidence because it had information in the letter about another murder that no one had been charged for at the time. So the judge allowed Ashley's attorney to read only certain portions of this letter, which the portions that she was allowed to read weren't, it left out key points, basically, that benefited Ashley. So when Ashley got her post-conviction attorney assigned and he filed his post-conviction motion, he filed a motion he filed ineffective assistance of counsel because not only was the letter not admitted and only a portion of it was allowed to have been read, the defense attorney did not follow through when she filed the direct appeal with the appellate court by submitting the whole letter to the appellate court to show them why that letter had significance to Ashley's defense. So in post-conviction, Ashley's attorney was trying to get the whole letter admitted as evidence or as an exhibit in post-conviction. And the state argued that, well, portions of the letter was admitted because they were read in court and they were in the trial transcripts. But it wasn't sufficient, and they lost that argument. But it's things like that which make post-conviction tricky, and it makes everything that was done in trial, you have to go back and say, can we raise it on post-conviction? Was it presented at trial? Is it on the record? And in all actuality, the letter that Garrett wrote to Ashley was not on the record. The whole letter wasn't on the record, and the attorney failed to submit the whole record or to submit the whole letter with her direct appeal. But anyway, that was ineffective assistance of counsel. So it was allowed in post-conviction, which was great. Let me catch up on chat here. They never checked Brad Weber's fan. Fan was able to get in the phone and social media accounts, but not the iPad. Still not sure how Ugly did the iPad extraction like he said he did. Well, I thought that they took the iPad to the fire department that night. Come here. Out. Go on. Go, 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 go. Didn't they take the iPad to the fire department that night? I thought they were able to access it that way. And we're going to get into this whole phone business because there's a lot of issues with the phone. And I'm trying to, literally, I'm going back through every single piece of, you always find like little nuggets everywhere of people saying things in different live streams from way back when, where you go, oh, and that's what we're dealing with trying to piecemeal all of these facts together. And the phone, like I've got notes in my book here about all of the different times that the phone was referred to by the family as the phone, or Becky Patty talking to Kelsey in an interview saying they weren't answering your phone, or she's talking to Mike Patty and she's saying she wasn't answering your phone. And that all kind of falls back into play with the fact that you've got a household with probably multiple cell phones. And you take, for example, when you have an old phone that you are going to switch out the SIM card to a newer phone, but you don't delete that old phone from that Apple account. And those two phones can interact with each other. Like, let me see if I can pull this up. So it says, if the old phone is still powered on, connected to Wi-Fi or cellular data, and it's signed into your Apple ID, and location services are turned on. What this means and what this can do to cell phone data being extracted from a cell phone. If someone else is carrying the old phone around, it could send location data to Apple services like Find My iPhone, the cloud, or apps using your location. Be seen as your location if you're checking something like Find My iPhone or you're sharing location via iMessage. What potential confusion can this bring up? I guess is the word I'm looking for. The potential confusion would be if you're using apps that rely on a device linked location like Find My Friends, family sharing, or shared Apple Maps route. The wrong phone might show your location. This can be misleading if law enforcement, loved ones, or locations-based apps are referencing it. What to do if you don't want this? Remove your Apple ID from the old iPhone, sign out, turn off Find My iPhone on that device, erase all content if you no longer need it. Transfer or reset the iPhone, erase all content and settings. Check your device's lists. So just think about this hypothetically. If the Patties were to give Abby a phone to utilize on the phone, and they go out there together, and the phone that Abby has is still connected to the iPhone or the Apple account. Was there sort of an issue of when you've got law enforcement and Mike Patty and even a fireman who testified at trial talking about cell phone pings all over town? Um, could that be an issue? Could that be where the phone dilemma came in at the very onset of the case? Because we know now that the Find My iPhone was on. He hasn't said if Kelsey has reached out. Mm. Sorry, guys, I'm reading the chat. So, I mean, there's a million things that still need to be combed through, and we do know. Well, I'll say we do know. I went back through today and listened to. Excuse me, I'm tired. I went back through this today and listened to the meeting that was held with the locals there that was recorded, and I'm going to upload them to my channel. But you do hear them talking about Dan McCain being on a bicycle. We'd learned, I didn't take note of this years ago when I listened to it, but it refreshed my memory that David McCain drove a 1990s Honda Accord, an older model Honda Accord, dark Honda Accord. So yeah, I mean Kayla, that's what we're looking at as being a possibility. If there was more than one phone with the girls, if there was more than one phone with the girls and both phones were still linked to the same iPhone account, one could have been running interference with the other, not like it was any kind of a master plan, but it was, if they're out there and they're pinging, or one is put in airplane mode or one has a SIM card removed, then the other one would somewhat take over and act as a clone. It would simply take over and start portraying, the data would then start bouncing off of that phone. And so let's pretend that the phone that the girls had with them was airplane mode, SIM card taken out. Something was going on, something was done with that phone, and the other phone was taken somewhere else. And that data is what we're seeing. I don't know. We're still going through all of it and piecemealing it all together. So, and this weekend, hopefully, got a couple things lined up now that yes, I have a couple things lined up for this weekend that I'm hoping will pan out. And I also plan to get with Cherie on doing some more readings on some other things. And then I still have my whole members only section video that I've got already put together and ready to go. But I don't want to do a video. I want to do it live on the Jeffrey McDonald case, which is, I'm tempted to ask Sergio to analyze him. And the reason I wanted to go over his case with all of you guys is because the Jeffrey McDonald case is it's a case that's very similar to the Delphi case. And he's in prison. and he still to this day claims he's innocent. However, I'm not convinced that he's innocent. But the case is interesting. I do have access to the whole case file, crime scene photos. It's a very sensitive case. There are children involved, so that's why I would do it members only. You know what? Truth over Birthday. I always thought about that. The book, Promise Not to Tell, and then the comment that her mom said that Libby had called her and told her that she had something to tell her. I wonder what that is. I agree. Odd difficulty. I absolutely 100% agree. If the girls were there on the 13th, they would have been found. And that's another thing that we're trying to trace. We have the list of the searchers, and every time you listen to different audio, like the police audio, or you listen to, I keep going back and listening. I can't wait to get the transcripts, because then I'll know for sure what was said. Because, when you're relying on a recap, we're getting portions, but we don't know if there were words left out. We don't know. But there's a couple of people who talk about where they searched. And the more people that we can plug in on that map to show that there were people on that side of the creek in that area searching, is going to, totally eliminate the fact that ground was walked. And not only that, but I think I told you guys on Monday, I'm going to have somebody on this coming week to talk about the terrain and where the girls were found and what that area, for the most part, could have been used for as hunters were out. And with the drainage of the ice and the water from the winter snow in February, we're going to talk about all of that. So the Delphi vault continues. Yes, and Travis Decker is still missing. I cannot believe that. And Lily and Jack supposedly now are alive. There's so much going on in the true crime world, and I wish I had more time to cover more cases. No, I don't. Odd difficulty. No, I don't believe the girls were unalive there either. This Travis Decker dude, he's got to be caught. Thanks, Rochelle. And Rochelle, I'll get that PayPal link added. And All Eyes, thank you for coming up and visiting with me tonight. Me, you, and Wester have to get together to go over these timeline discrepancies and pound out some things. I thought that they had just seen him on a trail cam somewhere. That Travis. I hope he's not dead. He needs to spend the rest of his life in gin pop is what he needs. Those 3 little girls were beautiful. All right, guys. Well, it's 20 after 10. I've only yawned in your faces like 50 times. I'm so sorry. But my alarm is set for 3:15 a.m. So please do me a favor. Share the video. Hit the like and the subscribe on your way out. That's all I ask. That's all free to do. Just share it. And look for some new links to drop for some upcoming videos. I know that me and Quester are working on some stuff for the vault for Monday, and I got to get with Cherie this week. Well, this week's almost over. Friday before Saturday, so we can get a little game plan. And I also want to get this Jeffrey McDonald case done on the members only. So Thank you guys all so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you thought it was interesting. You see Ashley and Nikki. Thank you. Under your scars, it's been a minute. I'm so glad to see you in here. Thank you to all my mods. Love you to death. Please just said no sign of him being alive. Don't tell me that before I go to bed. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Have a good night. Thank you so much.